for Jimenez, and the White Sox take the lead.
You got to keep working. Bottom line, I may not want to hear it, but that's all we can do is continue to work.
Ring him up, strike 3. And Tanner Banks comes in, gets the strikeout, and the White Sox, after a 3-hour and 3-minute rain delay, win it 6-5 in the 10th.
We've had months like this before where it doesn't look very good, and then we come out of it. We need to come out of it.
1-2 pitch, got him swinging. John Brebbia shuts the door, and the White Sox take the deciding Game 3, 5-1, and win their second series of the season.
A series like this one, you got to figure out a way to take this series, and we didn't. We didn't even give ourselves opportunities to do that today.
That's what it sounded like over the weekend from both Bally Sports Midwest and NBC Sports Chicago with Alex and T-Bone on BK. Alex, I said on Friday at the end of the show, this is the series that you have to get back on track with offensively. I don't care if you win 2 out of 3. That's fine. Fetty is a really good pitcher. He's been good so far this year. If he has a really good game and you lose that one, whatever. It is what it is. It's hard to sweep series. I was looking for the offense to get back on track, though, in the other 2 games, Friday night and Sunday. Strangely enough, it was the win in this series that had me the most deflated because of what the offense looked like on Friday night with Sonny Gray on the mound. That should have been a game in which you did not need to use any of your high-leverage relievers. It should have been. And instead, Brad Keller, who had 0 value across Major League Baseball, Brad Bleepin Keller, a guy that wasn't even good for my Royals, so bad that they basically just gave him away when they're a team that was starved for pitching over recent years. That guy shut you down. And then it continued the rest of the weekend with basically anybody that the White Sox threw out there. It didn't matter who was on the mound. Yeah, there was some good pitching from John Brebbia, and yeah, there was some unfortunate sequencing of events where you had that Randall. I don't want to hear any of the excuses any longer, dude. We are so far beyond excuses. It is about getting answers. Cardinals hitters not named Contreras and Arenado went a combined 6 for 77 over the weekend. If I added in Michael Ciani into that mix, who shouldn't be a part of this conversation, but here we are, Cardinals hitters not named Contreras or Arenado or Ciani had 4 hits over the weekend. 4. It's embarrassing, dude. It is absolutely embarrassing what is happening. And I am genuinely confused why they appear to be so loyal to Turner Ward. And I'm not telling you that Turner Ward is the problem for the Cardinals. I don't think he is. I think this is a player issue right now. But when I heard after the game, Ollie Marmol was asked, hey, and I thought Ben Fred did a great job in framing the question, and I credit to him for asking the question that had to be asked after that game. Is it time for a change in voice? Here's what Ollie Marmol's response was.
No, I like the voices we have, man. I can't speak higher of Turner and BA and Packy and what they do in that department. No one's getting a whole lot of sleep right now, I'll tell you that. They're working at it. They're trying to make sure they're not missing anything. The communication with the players has been really good. It's bottom line. It just does. So, yes, we continue to look at everything possible to make sure we get out of this. But these are the players we're going to win with, and we got to get them going.
Teams that are currently ranked above the Cardinals in runs per game include Colorado, Pittsburgh, and Oakland. The only team behind them right now is the Chicago White Sox, the team that just beat you 2 out of 3 games over the weekend. You're 29th in Major League Baseball in runs scored. You're bottom 3 in basically every statistical category. Right now, you have the 2nd worst OPS through 34 games in a Cardinals season in the last 100 years by this organization. Once again, let me say that one more time. The Cardinals this season, through 34 games, have the 2nd worst OPS by any Cardinals team at this point in the season in the last 100 years. No team in Major League Baseball is loyal to their hitting coach. None of them. There's 5 that have been with their organization for more than 3 years. And I honestly kind of respect that Ollie is this loyal to his guys, but at a certain point, Alex, you're not changing the manager, you're not changing the front office, you're not changing the players. There's only one thing you can do to artificially ignite this offense, and it's firing the hitting coach. It's really unfortunate, and I feel the way about this that I did about Berube. But at a certain point, man, you got to have a sacrificial lamb, and you got to have something to offer fans other than patience. And right now, that's all they have to offer you as a paying customer. Have patience, because these guys are eventually going to hit. It's unfair.
And sooner or later, that patience message is going to start pissing people off. And like, if you're going to act as if this team is loaded and have the players that are going to put you in a playoff position to win a World Series, then you need to stop with this BS. I mean, what you just did was the equivalent of the Blues losing in all 3 games against the San Jose Sharks. And how are we feeling about the Blues when they lost to the Sharks? We said this team is done. If you just do that against the worst team in Major League Baseball, and you mentioned Fetty. You had more hits against Fetty than you did against the other 2 starting pitchers, and Fetty was the one that was supposed to be great. That's the game you showed power in. That's the game you had offense. And what happened? Well, something else. Another wheel fell off of the bus, and that one crashed because your pitching fell apart. This team is in a position where, I'm with you, you have to look at your group and say somebody's got to go. And it unfortunately has to be the hitting coach here, because you can't keep running it back with this same thing. You can sit there and say, well, it's still early and we can't be this bad all season long. You're into the new month. You're into another month, and you just went through a stretch against teams that you were supposed to run the table with. You went up against the Mets. You did good. You won the series there. You went up against Detroit. You lost the series there. That was another one you should have won. And then you just did this against the White Sox. You got one more shot against another team that you just beat the series with, and then you start to get into tougher opponents once again. You're at a position now where I look at this offense and I know what to expect. I expect them not to be able to get guys on. I expect them not to have power. And I expect them to only win games when Sonny Gray's on the mound.
The only team, or the last team rather, that had this bad of an OPS through the first 34 games to make the postseason was the 1989 Chicago Cubs. It's been 35 years since a team was this bad offensively at this point in the year, and they went on to make the playoffs. You're already behind the 8 ball, dude. You're 20% of the way through the season. We've played 1/5 of the year already. It's behind you. There's no getting those games back. You're already 5.5 games back in the division. Everything else on your roster is going according to plan, including Steven Matz getting hurt. We knew that was going to be a part of the plan this year. Everything else is working. The base running, pretty good for the most part. Not a lot of stolen bases because you got to get on base to be able to do that, but it's fine otherwise. They're taking the extra bases. They're moving runners over when they have runners to move over. They're playing good defense. They're pitching pretty well. The rotation's been solid. The bullpen's been really good. We'll see if that falls now that you've had to replace Steven Matz, which, again, should have been a part of the plan. Drew Rom, unfortunately, going to be out for the year. But the plan has mostly fallen into place for this team. Unfortunately, the thing that we all just assumed was the thing that I assumed was a given is the thing that ends up being the biggest missing piece of the formula. You can't win games, it turns out, if you don't score runs. This is this new thing that they implemented in Major League Baseball where you have to score to win.
Oh, you can't even score when they put a guy on second base.
Dude, you're right. Bases loaded. Bases loaded with nobody out. Yeah, there was a hurricane that was taking place around you, but
could have played through it.
Yeah, seriously.
Bases are loaded with nobody out, and you go down, 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 game over, boom. I don't want to hear about C.B. Buckner today, by the way.
Even though
I don't want to hear about it. Yes, he's terrible at his job. We knew that.
Hey,
you allowed yourself to put the game in his hands.
It was a long rain delay. I don't blame him. Just want to go home, man.
And then wet, pinch hit in the spot, and
we just wasted a ton of time.
That's a symptom, man. By the way, did you see that they were going to pinch hit at the end of that game as well with Pedro Paez?
Yeah, who was on deck, by the way?
Paez!
And now he's in Memphis.
Who was going to be?
I did see he was up, but I never did end up checking to see who was pinch hitting for.
Oh, I know what you're saying.
Maybe.
So it would have been, it was the pitcher spot. But they could have used, it was a righty that was on the mound, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't it?
No, they switched to a lefty. That's why they pinched it for Gorman.
So, yeah, they were going to go to Pedro Paez in that spot.
And we were going to lose that game no matter what, too.
So, bases loaded, nobody out, and you don't score a single run in that spot. Nobody.
So here's the thing, BK.
They're so good at productive outs. That's all they needed. They needed a productive out, a fly ball, and scored a run.
If the Cardinals are going to sit there and continue to try and feed us the BS of patience, we're going to get out of this. This offense can't be this bad. Who are you waiting for to be the slump buster for you?
Because this was it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The slump buster The slump buster was supposed to be the Athletics. Well, you didn't score more than 3 runs in any of those games. The slump buster was supposed to be against Detroit. Well, you scored 6 and you lost that game 11-6. And then the slump buster was supposed to be the White Sox. Who else are you waiting for?
The game that you won against Detroit, you scored 2 runs in.
Well, that's what I'm saying. When you're winning, you're not scoring more than 3. When you're losing, your pitching blows up. Yeah. Who are you waiting for? Like, you can continue to sit there and preach patience. And look, I understand. Ollie's got nothing else he can say.
Yeah,
this team is trash, and he's in this position. But you can't keep feeding that same message because look at the schedule you just failed to accomplish. You think your slump buster is going to be against Milwaukee? But maybe the Angels
kick the crap out of us.
I mean, your slump buster's not going to be Boston. It's not going to be Baltimore. Not going to be Chicago.
Our text line said this to me, and like I thought they were being unfair. It's reasonable at this point. I kept saying, hey, look at the schedule. Schedule coming up is what should get this thing back on track. You had 3 against New York, 3 against Detroit, 3 against Chicago. This was the stretch where you got to get yourself back on track offensively because you're not going up against the best of the best pitching-wise. I didn't do it. They failed to take advantage of the schedule that was in front of them. You got 3 more against New York. T-Bone, you said it during the pre-show meeting today. Hey, New York, that was the slump buster for Tampa. Maybe it can be the same for the Cardinals. I'm done with that, dude. I'm done with it.
To be fair to myself, I didn't believe what I said in the office.
I don't want to look at the schedule any longer. It's not about the schedule anymore. It's about you. At some point, you got to look yourself in the mirror and say, we are not good enough. And that's why, like, again, I'm being totally serious when I say I kind of respect the loyalty that Ollie Marmol appears to have to his staff. I respect it. But also, at a certain point, and this was the thing with Matheny as well, Matheny was super loyal to his guys to a fault. If you look around and say to yourself, these are the only guys that are good enough to be able to coach this roster, well, dude, there's nothing left that can be done. At a certain point, the guy's got to hit, and right now it is very clear that whatever Turner Ward is saying to them, and this is not his fault, just like it wasn't Berube's fault for the Blues, but there comes a point in time where you have to say, I'm sorry, dude, this is a hazard of the job. If we don't produce here in the midday show, they will fire us because we are not valuable enough to the station to continue to be around. At a certain point, they got to say, we got to move in a different direction.
Look, I don't like how you always use our show as your example for the Cardinals' failures. Okay?
I like to think that I'm the Turner Ward of the station.
I mean, if we don't produce numbers and if we don't produce revenue, we will be fired and should be fired. That's our job. Our job is to produce in the middays. Some would say we should be fired anyways, but here we are. Boss just walked by.
I was going to say, you said all this while the boss walked by. You should quit using our show as an example.
Keep it to yourself, cat dad gamer.
If the Cardinals don't produce offensively, guess who the fingers are pointed at? First, the hitting coach, then the players. You know who's easier to get rid of? The hitting coach. So
but if they're not
never
getting
the guy that says, fire the hitting coach. But today...
But if you're not getting rid of him after,
you got to sacrifice something.
If you're not getting rid of him after this series, you're not getting rid of him.
It reminds me last year of the Ollie conversation, where I was never in the fire Ollie camp, but there came a certain point in time where if you weren't going to do it then, you just were not doing it. Yep. And I think we're approaching that point right now with the hitting coach. If you're not doing it now, I don't think it's happening.
I mean, somebody should just make Wilson Contreras the honorary hitting coach for this team and say, hey, Wilson, can you just work with everybody else?
Yeah, to your point on, like, if they don't do it now, they're not doing it ever. I think Ollie Marmol is making a statement today by if they don't fire Turner Ward, we don't see a press release, and I don't think we're going to. I think Ollie Marmol is saying, hey, man, either we're going down together as a staff or we're not going down at all. And, look, I respect that to an extent. But if the offense doesn't figure it out, I know they gave Ollie a contract extension. Guys, they missed the playoffs again. This is a whole new front office. This is a whole new coaching staff going into 2025.
I'm not even willing to say that this definitively right now. Like, what if
they're going to run
the
it
last
back?
2 years to suggest that they're going to change anything?
There's no, like, we always look at this team and say, like, oh, well, if it's that bad, there are going to be changes.
They've broken me, dude.
Welcome aboard, buddy. It is a fun place to be. But, like, let's go back. After last season, you guys were adamant, specifically BK. It was such a bad season. They have to change it. They didn't. They made a couple of tweaks, but they didn't change it. In fact, they gave the manager an extension to take concerns away. So why would I believe that after being shellacked by the White Sox in 2 out of 3, that they're going to make changes? They're going to do the same thing that they always do and say, we've got to be patient because this team is better than what they are showing.
All right. Now, all of that being said.
Really? You're going to go positive here?
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
I do think there's something that Ollie's right about.
We can't hit. I agree.
Turner Ward's not the problem. I agree.
I don't think Brendan Donovan is just going to be a guy that gets on base 29% of the time this year. I don't think Nolan Arenado is going to finish the season with, I think it's 10 home runs is what he's on pace for right now. I don't think Paul Goldschmidt is going to finish the year with a 575 OPS. I don't think Nolan Gorman is going to finish the year with a 335 slugging percentage. I don't think Lars Nootbaar is going to finish the year with an on-base percentage of 265. I don't think Jordan Walker is going to finish the year with a batting average of 155 and a roster spot in Memphis. I don't think all of those things are going to take place. I think the vast majority of them will be better at the end of the year than what they are right now. And the concern is, will it happen in time? Will it happen before it's too late? And that's why today I think you have to make a change. That's why today you have to save yourself from the possibility that this thing isn't going to get back on track. I believe this feels like a power play in the NHL. If you're a team and your power play is floundering, we've seen this a dozen times for the Blues in the last 5 years, you switch the roles. You say, hey, Steve Ott, you're now in charge of the penalty kill. Whoever the new guy is, you're in charge of the power play now. Will it actually change anything meaningful? Probably not. Was it probably going to get better over time? Probably. But you got to do something because eventually the voice gets stale. And so we got to try something new. That's where the Cardinals are at today. Because right now, for whatever reason, the voice is not getting through to these Cardinals hitters. And that's what we got to talk about on the other side. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can watch us on YouTube, where the Graveyard Chat is off and running today at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. This team feels right now like it's closer to a rebuild than it is to contention. Is that something that's going to sustain? And if so, what does that mean for the Cardinals? Talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
1-2 pitch, got him swinging. John Brebbia shuts the door, and the White Sox take the deciding Game 3, 5-1, and win their second series of the season.
The Boo Birds came out yesterday at Busch Stadium with Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. Audio courtesy of NBC Sports up in Chicago as the White Sox take 2 out of 3 here in St. Louis. They double their season total of wins on the road in the 3-game set over the weekend here in St. Louis.
The Cardinals officially are the slump busters for everybody.
Dude, you ain't wrong. All right, so the Cardinals as of today are 15-19 on the season. They're 5.5 games back in the division. The only teams in the National League that have a worse run differential than the Cardinals are the Miami Marlins, who have already started selling off their assets. They ended up trading Luis Arraez over the weekend to the San Diego Padres. The San Francisco Giants have a worse run differential than the Cardinals, although it's basically the same. And the Colorado Rockies, who everybody knew coming into the season were tanking because they're in a perpetual state of tanking in Major League Baseball. Alex, over the weekend, Ollie Marmol was asked about the issues that are plaguing the team right now. Here's what he had to say about the offense.
So many things are looking really good as far as how we want to play the game, the style of the game we want to play, what the pitching's doing, what the bullpen's doing, and the offense is struggling. And that's an area that we honestly felt pretty good about coming into the season. Some guys are adjusting to their second, third year in the league, and it's been tough on them. Other guys got off to a slow start. There's no excuses other than the offense is struggling at the moment. We got to find a way out of it. So the most frustrating part is that the other side of the game is looking really good, but we can't put it together in order to win ball games at the moment.
Alex, I think the Cardinals are a really interesting case study right now for Major League Baseball. Last year, they showed you what it looks like whenever you don't have a pitching staff or a defense, but you do have some of the offense. And I know people on the text line, I can already see it coming. 314-399-9646. BK, the offense sucked last year, too. No, it didn't. Up until July 31st, when they waved the white flag, Cardinals had a top 10 offense in Major League Baseball. And then they decided to go ahead and shut it down for the year, and they were bad down the stretch, which impacts the overall number. So keep your texts. I know.
Still stunk.
Last year, they had the offense, but literally nothing else. And you saw the floor. Just it didn't exist for the team. The floor dropped out. This year, they've got basically everything else, but no offense. And the difference is when you have the defense and you have the pitching, you maintain a pretty decent floor for yourself. But you can't reach the ceiling of that team unless your offense comes through. Like right now, if you had last year's defense and pitching, dude, this team would be as bad as the Rockies or the White Sox right now because that's how bad the offense has been. So they're a good case study for that. I still believe the offense is going to be better. Now, I don't think it's necessarily going to reach the ceiling of what I expected before the season. I think the 2013 comparisons, you could throw those out the window at this point. But can it be like a mid-tier offense in Major League Baseball? I still believe that in my heart of hearts. I don't know when it will happen, but I believe it, Alex. But if they're not, let's go super negative today, because why not?
Right.
If this doesn't get better, dude, they're in a rebuild right now, and I don't know where it goes.
Is it a rebuild or is it a retool? Because, like, you and look,
if these guys are as bad as they look right now, you're in a rebuild. Because these are supposed to be the players that you're building around. And if they're this bad, you gotta pivot somehow, and I don't know what the pivot looks like.
You got to pivot the way that the Nationals pivot, where they went out there and they just got younger players that were better prospects.
That's a tank, though. That's a rebuild.
Yeah, so you're right. I was just asking because, like, coming into the season, Walker and Gorman and Mason Wynn and Lars Nootbaar, these were the pillars you were building of the future. And if they're not, which right now it doesn't look like that way, and I got to be honest with you, you got to be putting together some stellar seasons for me to believe that these are the guys taking over for Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado moving forward. Yeah, it's a rebuild. And the problem with that is it's a rebuild, but you're a team that's in denial you're in a rebuild. And that's the worst type of rebuild, because at least when you know you're in it, you're making moves for it. You're making moves towards, like, hey, this is going to be bad. So let's develop, let's be bad, and let's get to where we want to get to. But if you're in denial, you sit there and stay in this weird purgatory of, we think we're competitive, so we're going to keep going out there and signing Lance Lynn's and Kyle Gibson's and bringing in pieces that make us good. But guess what? The core of your nucleus is bad. And so you're never going to get above 500. Maybe you go a couple games above 500 after a good hot streak, and then that's the best you can get to. So I feel like you're in a worse spot than just being in a rebuild. You're a team that doesn't want to admit you're going towards a rebuild.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that's why, like, if this is how this season is going to go, it's fascinating to see what they're going to do, both at the trade deadline and in the offseason. Because in the offseason is where you really get to that question. And that's where, like, I can understand where they looked at last year and they said, man, our pitching, whew, that sucked. Let's go ahead a ton of pitching. And they were right. I mean, look at their signings. Gibson's been good. Lynn's been good. Gray's been unbelievable. Like,
Mo was on a heater this offseason.
He's done great. The bullpen looks great. It's just the offense hasn't held its own. And that's where, like, if the season goes rotten this year, I don't think they're going to be doing the spending that you're talking about. We'll see. We got to get to that point first. But, yeah, they certainly feel like they are more in a rebuild. And the guy that kind of you can circle and look, the core players of Gorman, Donovan, Nootbaar, those three have to start hitting for you to feel comfortable about the core. But the guy that you really circle, and I hate to put the pressure on him because he's not even here, is Jordan Walker. Walker's the guy that's got to develop into the star. Otherwise, this core that you're developing will just be a 500 core because it doesn't have the superstar.
That's why he's been sent down every year.
Yeah.
Because he hasn't been able to handle the pressure, and he wanted to go down where he doesn't have the pressure.
I think the frustration is, like, you were looking at the Cardinals in the way that they were on these two timelines simultaneously, with Goldie and Arenado, and then Contreras kind of being in the middle, with all of the young guys taking place. And what they were hoping, I would imagine, is, hey, as Goldie and Arenado kind of age out of their primes, you're going to see Walker and Gorman and Nootbaar. These guys will emerge, and Contreras certainly fits into this criteria as well. They're going to emerge as middle-of-the-order hitters for us. And so, yeah, we won't have Arenado, that's the classic 30-homer, 100 RBI guy, but maybe he's 20 homers, still batting 285, and he's still getting an 85, 90 RBI. And maybe Goldie at this point is either gone or he's like a 5 or a 6-hole hitter. And we have those guys around the core middle of our lineup, which will include Gorman and Walker especially. Those two guys, I think, is where they were really putting all of their chips into the middle to bet on them. Well, Gorman's currently batting 182, and he's slugging 335, and Jordan Walker is back down to AAA again. So when that happens and you see this kind of a regression for them, that's where the real heart of the issue comes in is, our plan involved those guys, and those guys aren't hitting. So now what do we do? And I'm being totally honest when I say I don't know what the answer is. I don't know.
I don't know what the answer is this year because it's all going south and it's going south quickly. I think if you play this out in the long run, what would happen next year is next year would be the ultimate litmus test for all the young corp guys.
You
let Goldie walk. You say, Walker, we don't care if you hit $125. You are playing every day in right field, and we're going to figure out if you're a core piece or not. Noah Gorman, we don't care because next year, what would happen is next year becomes the retool year, and if it goes south next year, it becomes the rebuild.
But aren't you denying the inevitable right now? Like, you've lost a series to Detroit. You lost a series to the White Sox. You barely beat the Oakland Athletics. Aren't you denying the inevitable? I would much rather look at it now and say, hey.
Like today? I don't think there's any value in doing that today, though.
I think the value is getting more reps for these guys to figure it out. I mean, you're not
getting the reps, though. Like, who's not
Walker.
getting reps?
I would put Walker in this right now. I would be putting these guys in there. I mean, you're at the point
right
now
you're still a air quotes competitive team.
Well, and see, that's the part that I feel like you're living in denial.
I don't know because
I agree with BK. I don't think you're doing anything wrong right now, though, by having Walker down in AAA. I don't think you're losing anything by having that take place right now. I think that if you get to the deadline and it's still this bad offensively, then you're trading assets, and now we're doing what we did last year in August and September, and I feel like I'm back in Kansas City again. That's what it felt like last year. I remember this. I watched this my entire childhood, and if this is, I've also seen this, where you see guys that the team goes out and they're like telling you that all of this is going to be super exciting and they're going to be great, and then you watch them for a year and you're like, oh, okay, I can kind of see it, and then you see, wait, what happened to the guy that I saw last year? Angel Baroa, Rookie of the Year, player that played in Kansas City for a little while, and it was just over. Just over. After 1 year, it worked out, and then the league figured him out, and he was never the same guy again. Happens all the time across Major League Baseball. Go look at the one-hit wonders. The fear for the Cardinals right now is that's what's happening with Newt, with Donovan, with Gorman. Like, these guys just, the league figured them out, adjusted, and they never adjusted back. And if that's the case, if that doesn't get fixed, this team has way bigger issues than anything that can be solved in any one individual season. That's bigger than a 2024 problem. That's a 2028 problem.
Yeah, and for Jordan Walker, I think when you brought up those timelines that you were discussing with Arenado, Goldie, Contreras in the middle, and then this young core, they operated right. Like, that's the way a good organization should have it, kind of build up with the young core. It's what the Blues tried to do, and it went kind of haywire on them. So they did it right, but the problem is did you accelerate the timeline on Jordan Walker to where you slow down his development? Because Gorman and Nootbaar, and Donovan, building around those guys, it's smart to have them. Those are complementary pieces. Those are not stars. Nolan Gorman is not on a playoff team batting fourth. Gorman's on a playoff team batting like Kyle Schwarber would if he wasn't a leadoff hitter. He'd bat six and you love his power, but you live with his strikeouts because that's who Nolan Gorman is. Jordan Walker's the guy that's the superstar, supposed to develop into the superstar. And you have to wonder, look, I thought it was the right decision to bring him last year. I'm not going to talk out both sides of my mouth. I thought it was. I thought they made the right decision. I thought they made the wrong decision, sending him down last year. Did you accelerate his timeline too quickly? And now it just backs up his timeline a little bit more before he is actually developed into that superstar? Or is he more of the one-hit wonder and he just can't figure it out and will never hit anything that's away in the zone?
And by the way, I want to make this clear because this has sounded pretty doom and gloom. I don't believe any of this stuff. I don't believe Gorman was a one-hit wonder. I don't believe Jordan Walker is just going to regress this way. I don't believe that Newt and Donovan are broken. I think all of these guys are still good players. But for whatever reason, it's not working right now. And so this is where we get to the, okay, what's going to come next? And the what comes next is going to determine what the next 4 or 5 years of Cardinals baseball looks like. The Goldie and Arenado stuff is just about this year. The rest of them, dude, that's the next 5 years. And that's why they are a way bigger issue for me right now than anything that's happening with Goldie or Arenado. Those affect this 2024 season, which might be broken either way. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll get to questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. We'll talk to Katie Woo, Cardinals insider for The Athletic, at 12. But coming up next, we all had high hopes going into last night's game. Maybe Jim Montgomery was a little more real than we were previously anticipating as a possibility for the Blues. I think we can go ahead and kiss that dream goodbye. We'll tell you why next here on 101 ESPN.
Terry Hendricks here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals fall to the White Sox yesterday 5-1 as they dropped 2 of 3 to Chicago. They start a 3-game set with the New York Mets tonight. 6:45 will be first pitch as Kyle Gibson gets to start for St. Louis, and Sean Manaea will be on the mound for the Mets. The Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Overtime games end on a strange bounce or a rebound.
Send it to the net and get people to the net.
Lindholm, right wing corner. Pasternak is there. He scores! David Pasternak wins it for Boston.
That's what it sounded like on Saturday night as Boston ends the season and maybe an era for the Toronto Maple Leafs. That audio courtesy of ESPN. A fantastic call by McDonough as he says right before the goal is scored, Alex, you know, sometimes, most of the time in overtime, these games end with a weird puck bounce and a guy going to the net. Then, boom, puts it off of the wall. Pasternak right there, an opportunity on a breakaway, and he ends up scoring to send the Boston Bruins to the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. Alex, when I looked at what, from a St. Louis perspective, that game represented on Saturday night, it was basically a Blues coaching search sweepstakes. Loser of this game emerges as a candidate for the Blues coaching job. Winner emerges as a guy that no longer is in the Blues search possibilities. Unfortunately for us here in St. Louis, I think all of us were hoping for Jim Montgomery to be the guy that lost. Not because we hate him, but because we wanted him to be a part of the Blues, and the real possibility existed if they became the first team in NHL, MLB, or NBA history to blow a 3-1 lead in a playoff series and back-to-back seasons. Well, that didn't happen. And so now I think you can go ahead and kiss the Jim Montgomery dream goodbye. I don't think Boston's going to fire him. My guess would be that he ends up back as the head coach for them next season in some capacity, whether it's on an extension or as a lame duck. How did you feel about watching that, Alex, through the lens of the St. Louis Blues?
Yeah, I felt like any hope for Jim Montgomery was killed. I think you still have an opportunity if Jim doesn't want to be there. Maybe you get a mutual decision to just part ways afterwards. Maybe you get some type of trade. But the realistic opportunity for Jim Montgomery to be the Blues head coach was gone the moment Pasternak scored that goal. And I'm going to stick to it because I'm the only guy. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to have Sheldon Keefe as a candidate. I know everybody's talking bad about him right now.
It's been a rough 48 hours for our boy.
But, I mean, even Elliot Friedman was like, this dude's going to go on and have success somewhere. It's just like the narrative in Toronto should have died last offseason. There's no way they should have kept the same president of hockey operations, the same coach, and the same roster in place and say, let's run it back one more year.
Well, they fired the GM, Alex. Everything else was fine.
And they brought in one who traded away Matthew Tkachuk and got robbed. Basically, that was your second chance at life, Brad Treliving.
Well, he's going to have another opportunity this offseason to trade a star.
Feels a little like the Cardinals in their front office and coaching situation after 24.
Hein Bloom?
Just a little bit.
Are you ready to trade away a star? Were you hired the right guy to do it?
Yeah,
literally, I think it's the same thing.
Hein Bloom did that in Boston.
But, I mean, like I said, I wouldn't wipe away the possibility of Jim Montgomery still being available, because if he doesn't want to be there, then maybe there is an ability to move on from it. But with the coaches that are out there, and look, Boston is going to be in a rough match against the Florida Panthers, and that's back-to-back years where you couldn't get past the second round. So, but yeah, any realistic hope for Jim Montgomery, I think, is going to be gone now. And frankly, puts the Blues in a weird position because you're still playing the song and dance of waiting to find out who your next head coach is going to be, barring if the guy you wanted to speak to other than Drew Bannister is not available yet.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I don't know that Sheldon Keefe is going to be a guy that is at or near the top of my list at this point. After hearing him post-game on Saturday, he sounded like he was trying out for Craig Berube's spot on the TNT broadcast.
Sounded like he wanted out of Toronto.
You want to give this a listen, Alex? This is what he had to say after they lost. Sheldon Keefe on teams waiting for the Leafs to beat themselves.
They protect their net as well, or better than most any team in the NHL. And they were content to do that. You know, they were content to do that. It's very evident. Teams play the Leafs. They set up the game for the Leafs to beat themselves. And I thought we did that in game 3 and 4. We beat ourselves with how we played at home.
That beat yourself in overtime, too. I mean, watch the play. Mitch Marner had a Jordan Kyrou moment where he was standing.
He wasn't alone. Did you see William Nylander?
Oh, yeah. Morgan Riley, too. I mean, the play that Pasternak scored on, go back and watch it. I think I watched it 5 or 6 times in slow-mo. Pasternak saw exactly what was happening. They were trying to cheat offensively, and he put his stick out and said, hey, go off the boards. And he said, I will beat Marner and Morgan Riley to this puck. And he did so.
And William Nylander was like, no, don't go. Please don't go.
I will remember.
It's over. It's over for them as long as Mitch Marner is willing to waive his no-move clause this offseason.
That whole team is going to look different next year.
Yeah, and they're going to have a new coach. Sheldon Keefe will not be the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs next year. I can exclusively report that right here on 101 ESPN. I'm willing to do that with 0 sources in Toronto. I feel very confident
he's
that's going to take place.
Contract extension.
I also don't think he's going to be the coach here. I think he's going to be on TNT next year.
Oh, I know. He's going to get a coaching job.
You think?
Yeah. We were counting this. There's 8 coaching jobs available this offseason. Sheldon Keefe will get a coaching job. And
would you want him here?
I would consider it. Elliot Friedman was the one that said it today on the 32 Thoughts podcast. Like, he's going to go somewhere and prove a lot of doubters wrong. I think what took place with Toronto was stale last year. You had everybody that was complaining after losing in the second round, and people were like, this isn't the right coach. They need to move on. At the time, it was Nylander. They were talking about moving on from Shanahan, and they basically said, no, we'll run it back one more year. I think Sheldon Keefe just ran into a spoiled team that needed a fresh look.
And you want him here?
Yeah.
What are you about to just say it out loud?
I mean,
what are you talking about?
I mean, we think that's going to work here? you think we don't have any of those issues here?
I think
he's going to do better with Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas than he did with Austin Matthews and William Nylander and Mitch Marner?
Even Mitch Marner said it today. We are viewed as gods in Toronto, the players. So what are you going to be able to accomplish if you're a head coach in that situation? Again, it might not happen. I might look like a complete idiot, but I'm going to go with one of the best analysts in the game that said Sheldon Keefe is going to go somewhere next season and probably prove a lot of people wrong.
I agree with him. I think he's going to be on the Turner set and prove a lot of people wrong that he can't be a good analyst on cable television.
No, believe me, every team in the NHL right now is like, hey, we'll take Sheldon Keefe so we don't have to go with Bruce Boudreau.
I mean, the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to hire Craig Berube, and I think that's going to be a great hire for them.
They're going to hire
win a Stanley Cup.
One of 2 guys, Craig Berube or Todd McClellan.
If they hire Berube, they should not trade Mitch Marner.
Oh, no. If they hire Berube,
you should run him back. It's the only option, dude. They don't have wiggle room there.
You have to trade something.
Like who?
You got to move Tavares or Marner.
If I'm telling you that they're not trading Marner.
Fine, but Berube is not. I love Berube. Berube is not winning with a team that has 0 defense and 0 goaltending.
Well, you're not trading Tavares. Who's taking that contract on?
Somebody might. You'd be surprised. Especially if they eat 50% of that salary for 1 year. Tavares wants to stay.
Yeah, so how are you trading him?
You have to move somebody if you're Toronto.
He's got to no move.
Marner and Tavares could just tell you
They are in the situation that the Blues are in with their blue line, where it's like, okay, go ahead, Army, trade somebody. And then he goes to them and gets a good trade. It's happened before. And they say, no, I'm not moving. I mean, what did you say Marner said? That they're viewed as what?
Gods in Toronto.
You want to leave? You want to leave if you're Mitch Marner? You want to leave if you're John Tavares? You want to leave if you're William Nylander or just signed your contract? No,
I mean, that's what he's saying to the media right now. But we all saw what took place on the bench when you're chucking gloves and getting yelled at by your 2 teammates. You want to stay here?
If I'm them, I'm hiring Craig Berube and saying, let's run it back. We got rid of the GM that made a bunch of mistakes in their mind. We got rid of the coach now that made a bunch of mistakes. We're eliminating variables.
I don't think
next year we'll
I
go
don't
ahead
think
and
you
eliminate
can run it back. If you do that, you are the Cardinals. How'd that work for them?
Playoff success between the two. Coming up in 10 minutes, we'll talk to Katie Woo, Cardinals Insider, for the Athletic questions and answers next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care, taking care of your HVAC system. They have been taking care of people and making them comfortable since 1926. And when it comes to your HVAC system, you want to make sure that you have reliable, knowledgeable technicians that are coming out. And all of those things that I just mentioned are what takes place with Classic Air Care. I'm on their maintenance program, so every 6 months I have their technicians come out, check the unit, make sure it's good to go for the year. But what I love about them is they're upfront and they're honest with my HVAC system. I know it's old. I know it's probably not going to last me much longer. And I've discussed with them what purchasing a new HVAC system looks like, what pieces go into it, how much money you're going to be investing, and they have financing options available to you. So you're getting honesty, you're getting knowledgeable technicians that are taking care of you and your family with your HVAC system. So give them a call today, or you can check them out online and see about the offers that they have and get them out there for your maintenance before you flip on that AC for a permanent summer season. Classic Air Care, check them out online, classicaircare.com.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Guys, if you had to pick one position player and one pitcher moving forward for a Cardinals rebuild, who would you keep around? You only get to keep one. It's like an expansion draft, but instead of keeping like half your roster, you get to pick one position player and one pitcher that you're building around moving forward.
Well, I think
Alex,
we can all agree on the pitcher, Giovanni Gallegos.
Obviously.
So it would be Sonny Gray.
If we're going full rebuild?
Yeah.
I'd trade him.
I guess that's right.
I think I'd listen to him this deadline if they're
I don't
bad.
actually know if there's a pitcher that I would say I'm sticking with through the rebuild.
Let's say, by the way, on the current roster, because people could take Tink Hence and that.
Yeah, I don't really know if there's a pitcher that I would go with. Position player, I think I would still stick with Jordan Walker.
Pitcher, I would go with Ryan Helsley. In all seriousness, I would try him as a starter next year. Especially if you're going through a rebuild. Let's see what it looks like.
You're not the San Francisco Giants.
Maybe not, but I want to find out. That would be the guy. Because who else are you going to pick? Like Kyle Gibson, Lance Lynn, Steven Matz, Matthew Liberatore? I'm going upside. I'm going Ryan Helsley.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's a good answer. And I like the idea if you're rebuilding, try him as a starter. Like, why not? If he's a reliever, I don't like it because, as you're seeing with Gio, relievers break. But, okay, I would go Helsley. He convinced me on that one. Honestly, I was going to go with Alex and say none. Position player-wise, I agree still Walker, man. I still think the ceiling is there for him. I think if he can just figure out laying off pitches away and close the hip, he is going to be a star because he's so big, naturally, he's going to crush the baseball.
That would be
if he just gets a little bit of lift, I would go with Jordan Walker.
I could hear the argument for Mason Wynn, though.
Sure.
Those are the two guys that I could. Can I take no pitcher and just keep those two position players?
No, that's not how the game works. All right, from the 636 guys, Mike Florio recently wrote an article about the NFL needing to consider St. Louis as a serious market and the Chiefs having problems with their stadium funding. Do you hypothetically see how the Chiefs could come to St. Louis? No. However, if I wanted to amend that question and say, would you be open to the NFL having an expansion team in St. Louis? My answer would be yes. But I understand that there's a lot of open wounds that would have to be mended before that could take place. It would require it to be an expansion team as opposed to one that's moving here for the first time. It would require privately financed stadium assets that are put in place. Like, it would have to be similar to the City Park situation. And then you would have to get some kind of a commitment, and I know nobody would actually believe it, but you'd have to get some kind of a commitment that, like, hey, for the next 30 years, this team's going to be here.
Yeah. So, I think the part that, I would love this. I think the part that kills it, though, is the stadium. Yeah. It's very obvious around professional sports that cities aren't willing to put the money into new stadiums.
Yeah, and owners will not privately do it.
I mean, look at what the Cardinals are going through right now.
Yeah, I would love it. That's the holdup for me, and in the 30 years would be a holdup too.
If I told you there was a privately financed stadium readily available for you, there's not. There's probably never going to be. But if I said that on the front end, are we all in?
I would do it, absolutely.
I'd do it. I'd 100% be in.
At that point, there's really no downside.
No.
And in Florio's piece, I mean, you're proving that people are going to flock to it no matter what.
If you're going to UFL games, no disrespect to it. But if you guys are going to UFL games and the numbers that they're getting right now, 35,000 regularly, there is clearly a massive football market here in St. Louis as long as the team is good, which is the case, by the way, everywhere. Yeah. The Chiefs sucked. I remember going to that stadium whenever I was a kid, $15 lower level seats. I would just buy nosebleeds, and then by the end of the game, I would be sitting in the lower level. It's every market in America that exists in. So, but I don't think it's realistic, unfortunately.
I wouldn't want Mahomes anyways if they were
looking
to move here. Awful.
Also, there's zero chance that the Chiefs are moving.
Texans or the Lions.
If they move, they'll move to Kansas.
You're even skeptical. I sent into our group text the new rendering that they had. I was like, oh, a dome? And you're like, it's fake.
Yeah, it's fake. Yeah. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, did the Cardinals make a statement or a mistake in starting Matthew Liberatore over the weekend? We've got some interesting perspectives on that, I think, coming up in 15 minutes. But next, Katie Woo, Cardinals insider for The Athletic, joins us here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Rhino Shield, the exterior of your home, making it look brand new. I did this 3 years ago when we purchased our home. It was brick and it looked okay, but it just had a weird taste to it. It just did not look like a new home. And that's when I called Darren over at Rhino Shield to come take a look because I was going to do it myself. I said, I'll just buy the paint. I can paint it. It was just the front of my house. And I'm so thankful I talked to Darren because he explained to me that the paint you buy over the counter at a hardware store, it's going to get washed away after 1 year because the rain, it just deteriorates it. Or the sunlight, when that heavy sun UV rays are hitting it, it deteriorates the paint over time. Not with Rhino Shield. It 100% waterproof. It deflects 90% of the UV rays. They use a 2 to 3 coating process that sticks 8 to 10 times thicker than any other paint you're going to put on the exterior of your home. And it works on whatever siding that you have. So give Darren a call today. Tell him Alex Ferrario sent you, and you can change the exterior, the look of your home, your business, whatever it might be. 877-25-RHINO, 877-25RHINO.com.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We are officially 34 games through the Cardinals' 2024 season. And Alex, it is not as bad as it was a year ago. This time last year, the Cardinals were coming off of a weekend in which they had lost 2 out of 3 against the Detroit Tigers to fall to 10-24, excuse me, on the season. And at that point, we knew there was no coming back. It was over. It was all over. The pitching was just too bad. There was no coming back from a 10-24.
That's why I'd argue this is worse, because I don't know what the problem is with this team. I knew what the problem was then.
The problem is they can't hit. They're 15-19, though, only 5.5 games back. And with that in the back of our mind, we go to the 101 ESPN hotline where Katie Woo is there.
She's ready
to
for
join
hockey.
us on the show. She's the Cardinals insider for The Athletic, and you can follow her on Twitter. She is at Katie J. Woo. Katie, we appreciate the time as always. How are you doing this morning?
You know, guys, it's a new week, a new day, a chance to start fresh. I don't know. I'm running out of ways to try and, believe that maybe this offense will be better, because after 34 games, it's unfortunately been the storyline, the defining theme of this Cardinals team. And while I agree, it's completely different from last year, it's by no means time to mail it in. It is frustrating because the Cardinals, simply put, should be playing a lot better than they are.
Katie, are we seeing the frustration boil over now into the clubhouse? Because with Nolan Arenado's comments yesterday, when you get to the point where your leaders are starting to be vocally frustrated, that seems to be a bigger problem.
I think the Cardinals have done a commendable job in April. I mean, as someone who went into the clubhouse every day, of being even-keeled, being positive, staying collected. And I think that is mostly true. Don't get me wrong. There are plenty of guys frustrated. We talked to Brendan Donovan after the game yesterday. There was clearly some frustration there. Nolan Arenado, Wilson Contreras. But it's different because the frustration here this year compared to last year is we're better than this. What's going on? So this is still a confident group. This is still a group that believes they are much better than their record and that they have the pieces to make a run for it. It's just confusion and frustration at their own performance rather than how a team is structured compared to last year that I think is really starting to get to them. And I think that's maybe even a good thing because when you look at this Cardinals offense, the players that the front office and management built around for this lineup are the ones that aren't performing. This isn't a pitching issue. This isn't a bullpen issue or a defense issue. It's strictly offense. And you look at these guys that are struggling, again, history suggests it won't be for long, which I think is why people are getting so frustrated, both fans and players alike, because there's no way it should be like this still.
It shouldn't be, but it is. And I think that's where things get really tough, Katie. And You know me. You know I'm not somebody that calls for the hitting coach to be fired. I said all year last year I didn't think that they should fire Ollie. I do think it's a conversation kind of that needs to take place, though, now. And you were able to talk to Turner Ward, having a one-on-one conversation with him about why he believes that this offense will eventually get turned around. No pun intended there. What did you take away from that conversation with Turner Ward about what they're trying to get accomplished and why we're not seeing the results on the field?
To me, that conversation, and full credit to Turner, who went out of his way on the off day to have this conversation, it opened my eyes to what the Cardinals hitting coaches are really looking at and what they're stressing to their hitters. It's less mechanics. It's more pitch discipline. It's all about approach and feel. And you look at these Cardinals right now. I'll use Lars Nootbaar as an example, even though there are plenty. Lars Nootbaar has a ton of swing and miss in his game right now. Jordan Walker had a ton of swing and miss in his game. And to me, that's a sign that guys are chasing out of the zone. And Turner Ward and his staff, Brendan Allen, Packy Elkins, they focus on being selective, finding a pitch to hit and driving it in the zone. Cardinals hitters right now, and maybe this is a product of pressing, of feeling the need to hit because there's so much pressure, rightfully deserved, on these hitters right now, are chasing out of the zone. They're not being selective. They're not waiting for their pitch to hit to drive the ball. So there just seems to be a disconnect in terms of the information and the actual production of it. And I don't think that any Cardinals players are going to go out there and say, it's a hitting coach problem, because they'd be the first to say it's not. It's a hitter's problem. Turner Ward can't take a bat in the batter's box, stand in, and tell you which pitch to swing at, right? This is a hitter's thing where they have to identify which pitch they want in the zone, when they're going to be aggressive and actually do it. But right now you're seeing this combination of virtually no recognition to be able to get to those pitches, and you're seeing guys swing out of their zone, get out of their approach. It's this very dangerous cycle when teams start to slump, especially collectively, that the Cardinals have found themselves in right now.
For me, Katie, the scary part is hearing Ollie talk, saying, we expect him to get out of this at some point. The teams that you faced where you had the chance to break out of this and get going was Detroit, it was the White Sox, it was Oakland, and you were unable to do that. I don't know if there's a team in the near future that you look at if you're the Cardinals and say, this is the team that we need to take on so we can get right.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Losing a series to the White Sox is unfathomable, and certainly does not bode well for the rightfully frustrated fans who just aren't convinced that this is a winning product. Now, the team thinks otherwise, and that's fair, but, I understand from a fan's perspective, if your team just lost to the White Sox, which had won one road game all season entering their series against St. Louis, how, as a fan, are you supposed to have faith in this product? Now, I thought Ollie Marmol, talking to him after the game, he said something pretty enlightening. He said, these are the players we're going to win with. We have to get them going. To me, that is the most telling statement yet. When the Cardinals made their lineup and designed their 26-man roster heading into this season, they did so under the premise that Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, Wilson Contreras would hit for slug like they have done throughout their entire careers. All right? Fair. Not going to get a lot of pushback from there. That's a pretty sound strategy. Their supplemental power, guys that don't have to slug all of the time, but consistent enough to supplement the top three. Lars Nootbaar, Nolan Gorman, Jordan Walker. So you're looking at a lineup with 6 guys that can slug. Now your other 3 spots, those are in whatever order, going to Mason Wynn, Brendan Donovan, Tommy Edman, guys that are going to hit for contact and get on base. You're feeling pretty good about that lineup. Certainly, by May 6th, you would not expect 7 players to have an OPS under 650. You would not expect Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Gorman, Lars Nootbaar to have an OPS under 600. I don't, you expect 1 or 2 guys to slump at some point. That's just the nature of the game. But an entire lineup is baffling, really. And these are the guys that Ollie Marmol needs to win with. There's not help in AAA. They're not going to get help outside, externally. If the Cardinals want to win, it wouldn't matter what their pitching does, how good it is, how effective their bullpen is, how improved their defense is. The guys that they have built their starting 9 around have to hit, and that's the problem because they're not.
So, and Katie was our guest here on 101 ESPN. You can read her great work. She had 3 pieces over the weekend, and then there was also the piece with Turner Ward on Thursday. A ton of great content over at The Athletic. If you're not a subscriber, you need to be at this point. theathletic.com/St. Louis is the best place to go, or just follow her on Twitter at KDJWoo. You can get a link there. Katie, when I look at it and we say, okay, they shouldn't be this bad, and I agree with you. I'm baffled by this. I don't understand it. None of it makes sense. Donovan is not a bad hitter. I don't believe that Nootbaar's a bad hitter. I don't believe Goldie and Arenado are just done. I don't believe that Gorman's going to finish the season with like 20 home runs. I don't believe any of that. And yet, all of that is happening right now, and we're 20% of the way through the regular season, and there's really nothing you can do with any of those guys individually to just make it click into place. And I don't think firing the hitting coach will necessarily do that either. However, I thought it was interesting yesterday when asked by Ben Frederickson of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch about changing the voices. Ollie was very stern, very clear. That is not something that they plan to do. Have you talked at all with Ollie about that, on, off the right, whatever? What is your sense on why they are so committed to Turner Ward being the voice that will turn this around?
It's a good question, and it's fair, and I'm with you. You never want to publicly call for someone's job, and it's tough because the Cardinals, also based on what they did last year, just haven't put together a convincing product over the last 18 months or so. But still, throughout the organization, whether you're talking to management, the front office, players, there's a public backing. And if the players are backing the hitting coach and the players are buying into the process, there is no reason for an organization to make a change there. What you're going to do is then alienate your players. And Ollie Marmol can't afford to do that. John Mozeliak cannot afford to do that. They're already struggling to get fans back in there. You can't lose the players as well. So I'm with you, BK. I don't think this is sustainable. I think we talk about this every week, that the offense will be better. At this point, I feel like maybe I'm gaslighting myself. I don't know, because everything points to this offense being so much better than it is. Maybe not a top 10 offense in the league, but certainly not the worst in baseball. I just don't know when it's going to turn around. You look at this club, and they emphasize defense in the outfield, and we thought that was a great strategy, but now at what cost? You hope that Dylan Carlson, who had a great spring, I'm not saying he's going to be the answer to fix every problem, sure, but can help boost that offense production from the outfield, because it hasn't been very good. Cardinals fans are going to light me up for this, but hear me out. Matt Carpenter's close to coming back from a rehab assignment. I'm not suggesting he's going to fix the offense. I am suggesting that he could probably hit better than the left-handed production combined right now, which is hitting right around 200. I'm also not suggesting he's going to play every day, but at least, these are the guys that the Cardinals have to look at before they can really go outside, if that's even an option right now, and say we have to see where these guys are at if they can help. It's not the best place to be, obviously. They're back in last place. They're 4 games under 500. And we've talked about this before. I'll say it again. They're a better club than their record. But right now, the only thing they can really do is hope that the guys that they structured this roster around figure out how to hit. There's nothing else they can do.
2 quick things for you, Katie. We'll get you out of here on this. One, you mentioned Carpenter is close. What do you think the move is for him?
It's a good question. I mean,
Crawford,
I think it depends on when they do it.
Feel like the 3 candidates, but which direction do you think they go?
Well, I think Siani would stay, because outside of Carlson, they don't really have a center fielder. And Siani, to me, is the perfect defensive replacement in these late 1-run inning games where he can really solidify the defense. I don't anticipate the Cardinals DFAing Crawford by any means, so that would unfortunately mean for me. And he hasn't really been playing that often as well. So it's tough. Again, we don't know if Carpenter is ready. I would imagine that he's going to be back soon, though, just based on how his rehab assignments have been going. But, yeah, it's tough.
And then final one, yesterday there was the decision on Matthew Liberatore getting the start in that game instead of going Gibson there and then maybe bringing somebody up or going with Kloffenstein even in that game and then being able to continue to utilize Liberatore in the coming days out of the bullpen. What did you make of that decision, and what was your impression when talking to people around the organization as to what went into that choice?
You know, I thought the Cardinals were playing with fire, but that is only because they let such a winnable game evaporate on Saturday. That, to me, is where the Cardinals lost the series against the White Sox. When you have bases loaded, no outs, trailing by 1, and you go strikeout, 3-hour delay, and then strikeout, I mean, that just can't happen. So you lose a very winnable game. The White Sox practically gifted Saturday's game to St. Louis, and they were like, no, thank you. And then you go and you say, all right, Matthew Liberatore has been lights out in the bullpen. I think he's been a great fit there. And we're going to hope for a bullpen game, even though we're in our third game of 13 straight, and we're going to roll the dice and go for it. I didn't feel great about that decision. I actually felt not great at all. The Cardinals got the best they could possibly get from Libby and Kyle Leahy. I think just a tremendous job from those guys, but it wouldn't matter because the offense, had 4 hits and wanted that with a runner in scoring position. So while it's a questionable decision, and I do think they got away with one there in terms of strategy, to me, it ultimately didn't matter. I mean, they could throw Alec Burleson, and it, wouldn't matter because they don't have the offense to supplement any kind of pitching performance. So we'll see how Libby is for the next couple of days. Probably unlikely to be used. There'll probably be a roster move. Cardinals will need a starter in Milwaukee at the end of the week to fill in that role that they used on Sunday. But yeah, kind of a mess of roster decisions to be made over the next couple of days. Hopefully the Cardinals, for their sake, can figure it out against a Mets team that, to their credit, isn't playing very well either. So we'll see. It should be, regardless, a very interesting week in Cardinals land.
Katie, you could have just stopped the sentence at kind of a mess. Would have been fine there.
All right, that's where we're at. Hey, Katie, we appreciate the time as always. This is certainly an interesting time to be covering the Cardinals as we go through a meandering of sorts. I was wondering if there maybe would be something to announce today. It sounds like probably not. So we appreciate the time as always. We'll talk with you again next week.
You got it, guys. Talk soon.
BK just trying to get people fired
on 101 ESPN.
Every day,
that's
man.
Not true.
Every day he's just trying to get somebody. Whether it's T-Bone,
personal, man.
Whether it's me, whether it's Turner Ward, Craig Berube, Ivan Barbashev, it's nonstop with you, man.
Dude, I got the Dylan Carlson thing again over the weekend. Are you bleeping kidding me with this Dylan Carlson hate? I don't hate Dylan Carlson. I think he's fine.
Sounds like you hate him. Sounds like you'd like to see him fired.
I don't think he's a center fielder. Did you see the first ball that was hit to him in center yesterday?
So bad.
And I don't think long term he's going to start in either of the corners over Nootbaar or Walker. Now, ain't looking great on me on that end right now as one of them is in AAA and the other's hitting, my weight. Not great.
Oh, here he is again, calling people big.
No, small. But I don't think he's going to start long term in either of those spots. I think he's a 4th outfielder for a really good team. And I don't think that's a shot at Dylan Carlson. I think it's the reality of where he's at with his production over the last couple of years.
That was his role coming into the season.
Absolutely, but that makes me a hater, which is fine. But I don't think it is anything that's hating. I think it's just,
look, Dylan,
that's who he is.
We all want you to be employed still, buddy.
I would love for Dylan Carlson to be great, man. It makes my life a lot more enjoyable when I professionally have to watch good baseball in my personal life.
So send him to Tampa Bay?
Good point.
Or San Francisco.
Tampa would be such a great spot for him. God, he would be amazing down there.
Their outfit could be a Randy Rosarena, Carlson, and Richie Palacios.
Oh, my God. That would be amazing.
And the Cardinals would probably send Liberatore back in that package.
And get another
starting game 1 of the World Series.
And get another bullpen guy that's supposed to be the ace.
And he would probably be good in the bullpen, but it's but you traded away an all-star corner outfielder.
And it took him 3 years to be good in the bullpen. We spent 3 years trying to, squint to see this guy as a starting pitcher.
All right, coming up
going
next.
back to that.
I do want to talk a little bit about the decision to start Matthew Liberatore. In and of itself, not a terrible decision, and he was good yesterday. Credit where it's due. The results, at least, even the process, gave up a ton of hard contact, but the results were good, and credit to Liberatore. Good for him, man. I don't know that I loved the decision, and I'll explain why coming up next here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK. So yesterday, the Cardinals made a big decision. They decided to switch up the way that they were going to handle their pitching plans. They decided instead of having Kyle Gibson start on Sunday, which was our expected route on Friday when we left the show, Alex, it would be Matthew Liberatore, and he would be throwing in what is essentially a bullpen game for the Cardinals. Now, there's a lot of context that goes into this. Over the weekend, Friday and Saturday, they had to utilize their high-leverage relievers a lot, so none of them were going to be available yesterday, except for Kittredge, who apparently has a rubber arm and just is willing to throw whenever you ask him to. But let's set that aside. High-leverage arms basically off the table. Now, on Monday, you continue in a stretch of 13 games in 13 days, Alex. They don't have an off day on Thursday this week the way that they have so far for basically every week throughout the regular season thus far. So you've got to kind of keep that in the back of your mind as well. And the Mats spot in the rotation is going to come back up again, and you're going to have to make a choice later on this week as to who's going to start that game. So technically, yeah, it's a one-game decision, but also it has a trickle-down effect of what that means for the rest of the week for the Cardinals with their bullpen usage. Alex, my concern, and the reason why I don't think I would have gone with Matthew Liberatore in that spot is because I need Liberatore in the back end of my bullpen in games where I'm likely to win. Yesterday was not a game you were likely to win, and it sucks to say that, but it's true. This offense is not good enough to expect them to go out and mash. I heard Ollie was on the Cardinals radio network before the game yesterday in his typical weekly Sunday conversation, and they basically were talking about this, and he said, hey, hopefully we mash. Because he knew, and everybody knew, we're going to have to score like 5 or more runs in order to win this game today. The odds of the Cardinals doing that were slim to none. I don't care who was on the mound for the White Sox yesterday because it hasn't mattered for the Cardinals all season long. So I would have just basically conceded that game the way that a baseball team a lot of the times will concede a run. Play for Monday. Play for Tuesday. Play for Wednesday. Don't allow one loss to become 4. That was the theme of last season for the Cardinals, where they just didn't have an ability to stop the bleeding. And by having Matthew Liberatore start that game yesterday, he's probably off limits for each of the next 3 days at a minimum. So now you look at your bullpen, you are super light. You better get innings out of your starters over the next few days, because if you need more than 4 innings, more than 3 innings, really, it starts to get kind of leaky earlier than expected for this pin, the way that it's now constructed over the next few days. That's my problem with the way that they decided to do this. It's less about what they were going to get out of Liberatore yesterday and more about what they cannot now get out of him over the next few days.
Yeah, because I didn't mind the decision to use Liberatore there because, frankly, out of all the pitchers that you could have used in that spot, he probably gives you the best chance to win.
Totally agree.
But you're right. If you're Oli Marmol, you cannot disrupt your bullpen because your best chance to win every single game is the depth of your bullpen. And the fact that you just ruined it there with one use of Matthew Liberatore puts you in a position where you might potentially lose the next series in the first 2 games. You can't. The only way you're winning baseball games right now is because of your bullpen, because you know that your team is not going to score more than 3 or 4 runs, and you can't keep living on hope that you're going to mash. If you believe you can make the playoffs, your best route to that is making sure that the weapon you have from start to finish is your bullpen, so you can't abuse it. And frankly, I do think it was a bad decision because now you've impacted yourself for the next 2 or 3 games of what you're going to do with that bullpen.
Yeah, and I'm with you guys. Because now you look at, they're probably going to make 2 roster moves today. They're probably going to send down Leahy, and they're probably going to send down John King. Yep. And they're going to call up, my guess, just guessing here, would be Andre Palante, and maybe them add somebody from the 40-man. And
they said they wanted to get another start, I think, out of Palante down in the minors.
Yeah, that's what we call a mistake. They should call up Palante and get up a fresh arm and make a 40-man move as well, because they just need 2 arms that are in the bullpen because Liberatore is going to be unavailable for 3 days. He's probably unavailable the whole Mets series. My issue is okay, so I understand, like, if you're pinned into this corner, like, say Steven Matz was, like, scratched from this start, you know, he was available, going to start, and then it was something happens, he gets scratched. Okay, then I totally understand it. Guys, they had like 4 days to figure this out, and their best option was, let's go with Matthew Liberatore. To deplete your depth in the bullpen for the next 3. Guys, they could have avoided Sam Roberse making his next start in the minors. By the way, he's on the 40-man. It's not a 40-man move you have to make. Kloffenstein was on turn. Hell, Zach Thompson, and look, he's probably not a big league pitcher at this point. He's got to work on things.
They also said they wanted him to work on stuff down there.
So that one I totally understand. Why are we starting Sam Roberse 2 days before this? Why is he not the guy that's getting the call up? You say, okay, Memphis, you're not starting him. We need him in 2 days because we think he can give us at minimum 5 innings, and that can protect our bullpen for the next couple of days. And you know who they're probably going to start the next go-around for Matz's spot? Him. Like, I don't understand why they decided to do that. That, to me, was where it was roster mismanagement, in my opinion.
I tend to agree. By the way, I don't think they're going to call up Palante because he started on the 3rd, so he wouldn't. I don't think he would be available today and possibly even tomorrow. Definitely today, though, would not be available. So I'd be surprised if he's one of the guys that ends up getting called up. My assumption would be Lutos, and I don't know who else comes up. They might just make one move. Kloffenstein, maybe. Maybe they say, hey, we need a length out of our bullpen now, although he started yesterday, so he's not available. I don't know. I don't know what they do. They're in a really tough spot right now.
And after Leahy's performance yesterday, and look, I still don't, I'm not convinced Leahy's a bullpen arm moving forward, but after his performance yesterday, they probably can't pass him through waivers. Somebody will probably see what he did yesterday and go, oh, hey, we could put that on our 40-man buried in the minors and see if we have found something.
Somebody on the text line said, why wouldn't Libby be available this series? He only pitched 3 innings yesterday. He threw 50 pitches.
Yeah, he's probably unavailable for 3 days.
I was going to say, that's 3 outings by him, right?
Yeah, I would be shocked if he's available today or tomorrow. Shocked. And
maybe the last game.
Maybe Wednesday he'll be available. I would not want to push it, though. That's getting into the territory of us being super aggressive with a guy that is kind of floating right now between starting and relieving, and he's finally starting to show you something. And this is one of your most prized possessions long term when it comes to like, hey, Libby might be a starter for you next year. He might be in your rotation because of what he's showing you out of the pen. I wouldn't mess with that. I don't think that I would want to do that. Somebody else said Graceffo might be a guy that's available. He's got a 2.5 ERA over the last month. He last pitched on the 1st, so he probably should be available today if you needed him to. And there's been some conversations over the last year or so about him maybe profiling best as a reliever. Maybe that's the guy they decided to make the call on. But I think Helsley and Romero, you're probably not going 3 out of 4 with them. Or 4 out of 5, excuse me. So they're probably available for one of the next 2 days. Like, this is where things get dicey. It gets really dicey for you when it comes to what are we going to do with our pin over the next 2 days. They are really lucky that they can typically count on Gibson to give them innings, give them length. So maybe you get through 7 in a best case scenario with Gibby today and just go to Helsley, Romero, and then tomorrow we've got everybody else available. Tomorrow's where it gets really concerning, dude. Michaelis on the mound, he could give you 4 or 5. And now you're chasing once again, and this is where it starts to feel like last year. That decision yesterday was the first time where I said to myself, ooh, this reminds me of last season. Everything else roster-wise, everything else about this team, like the way they're playing, the only other similarity to last year is that they're losing. Because the defense is much better. Situationally, I know people don't... Saturday was bad, bases loaded, no outs. That was terrible. But generally speaking, they've been better with like getting the fly ball production, sack bunts, all of this stuff.
The productive outs.
Yes. Sunday felt different. Sunday felt like a repeat of last year, and where again, you're chasing your tail with roster decisions.
And because it was avoidable, you know, it wasn't a surprise that Matz wasn't making that start. Hell, they put him on the IL 4 days prior to that game or 3 days prior to that game. You had Robersay, who could have been on turn. You had Kloffenstein, which they're telling you by their actions, he's not a big league pitcher, which is fine. I get it. You had time to prepare to say, hey, Robersay's going to get 2 extra days off, and he's going to make a start at the big leagues. This wasn't a surprise Steven Matz was hurt, and that's where it is a lot to where it was last year, where it was just weird roster mismanagement, if you want to call it that, weird decisions constantly going on from the Cardinals organization.
By the way, on the Thompson thing, I think the reason why they are not bringing him up right now, why they didn't bring him up yesterday, is because he's your 6th starter right now.
Yeah, you're trying to get him back to that level.
Mo said yesterday on the radio that Drew Rom is officially going to be out for the rest of the year. He's getting surgery for something. I don't know exactly what it is. He didn't mention it, but he said because of the surgery that he's getting, he's going to be out for the rest of the year. You have no other option as your 6th starter other than Simmerversa. I think that's how you pronounce it. And with him, they have no idea if he's going to profile as a starter. He feels Drew Rami. Where it's like, hey, could you go out there and have him start games for you? Yeah. Do you expect a whole lot out of it? Probably not. His stuff just isn't. It's not what you typically expect from a big league starter. It might work, but it could look kind of similar to like Jake Woodford last year. And in that scenario, we saw what that looks like. So they need to get Zach Thompson right. They need him to be somebody that ends up playing into their plans. Matthew Liberatore starting yesterday, I thought was a mistake. I would have gone to Kloffenstein. I don't know if it would have worked well. I think he probably could have given you 4 innings, though. And that's what you ended up getting out of Liberatore. Did it mean you were going to win that game? No. I don't think you were going to win that game no matter what. And so you got to look at it with reality and say to yourself, okay, what's the best way that we can win tomorrow? Even if it means potentially conceding this game today. I think it would have been going with Kloffenstein there. Coming up next, NFL Quick Hitters here on 101 ESPN. Alex, I gave a parlay over the weekend going into Friday, during Friday's show. Canucks to win, Knights to win, Leafs to keep it within 2, and the Rangers to win outright. That was a $10 bet to win $116 over on the Circa Sportsbook app in Illinois. If I bet anywhere else on that, it would have been less than $100 that it paid out. But because I did it with Circa, $116 in my account. We win that parlay, 4 legs. You know I love me some parlays. I know you love parlays even more than I do, and we're placing them all on the Circa Sports app.
You need to download the app now because I've got your game 1 4-leg parlay, which if you put $10 on this, you're bringing home $205. You do this on DraftKings app, only $175. So, ready? Write it down. Get ready for the BK and Ferrario parlay. Rangers win game 1. Bruins win game 1. Colorado wins game 1. Edmonton wins game 1. That's a 4-leg parlay.
I like that, Alex. That feels like a winner to me.
Because you did it on the Circa app, BK, you're bringing home the most money possible.
I'm worried about Boston.
Don't be worried about Boston. Jim Montgomery is just waiting to get to St. Louis right now. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Terry Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals fell to the White Sox yesterday 5-1 as they dropped 2 of 3 to Chicago. They start a 3-game set with the New York Mets tonight. 6:45 will be first pitch. Kyle Gibson on the mound for St. Louis. Sean Manaea will get the start for the New York Mets. The Sports Update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters. Alex, I think Kirk Cousins is having a rough go of it right now.
Why, man? He just got traded to he signed with a new team. He got a ton of money. He's going to be the starting quarterback, maybe.
Albert Breer reported this morning that one of the biggest reasons why Kirk Cousins decided to leave Minnesota in the offseason was because the Vikings made him aware, they were planning to draft a quarterback high in the draft. He signed with a new team.
Why you mad, bro?
The Atlanta Falcons, who did not tell him that they were going to draft a quarterback in the first round. But they did. They decided to take Michael Penix Jr. And according to his agent, they alerted Kirk Cousins very, very, very briefly right before the pick was made that, hey, we're going to make quarterback selection.
Let me walk you through how that went. Click, click, click. Hey, Kirk. Yeah, we're going to draft a quarterback. Bye.
Can you imagine being Kirk Cousins today? I know he's making $45 million over the next few seasons. He's doing all right. But that sucks, dude. I tell you guys all the time, there's a value on happiness. And Kirk Cousins thought he was going to go find some happiness, and now he's miserable again.
Well, but his wife's close to home, so at least
you've got that going for you. And he's got $100 million in the bank that's guaranteed for him over the next 2 seasons. That all helps.
If you told me you're going to pay me $100 million and I could just sit on the bench all season, I'm in.
There is some professional gratification, though, that comes out of doing your job well and knowing that the team that you play for is supporting you for doing that job well. And it doesn't appear that the Falcons necessarily have that support that he expected.
Yeah, well, and not a good way. Just like we talked about with Jaden Daniels in Washington, like it's not a great way to start your relationship off. If you're like, yeah, you're going to play for us, damn it, no matter what. Not a great way to start your relationship off with the new team that you signed with to help that team be a Super Bowl contender, and then being kind of lied to by omission. So, Kirk Cousins, I feel for you, buddy, but hey, $100 million richer.
What's a worse start? Kirk Cousins having this happen, or Jane Daniels going to Topgolf with all the other top prospects? I don't know which one's worse.
Jane Daniels, because he's not getting $100 million.
That's probably true.
So much worse. This is so much worse. Jaden Daniels will get his money down the road, and I'm sure he's going to be just fine.
He's probably already got a counter on his wall. How many days till I leave Washington? We'll just look right there.
Got a circle on it. 2028 is going to be forever.
Oh, my God, dude. Just brutal. Brutal way to start the marriage. It's like cheating on your wife the night before you get married. Like, what?
Bachelor party, eh?
Oh, stop it. All right. Continuing on with some NFL quick hitters here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, we mentioned this briefly earlier today, but apparently Mike Florio, was he on Balloon Party?
Yeah, he was on the Balloon Party. Yeah.
So he wrote a big piece over at Pro Football Talk this weekend about how St. Louis continues to show itself well with the UFL here. They're getting 35,000 fans regularly for the Battlehawks. They did so again on Saturday, despite it going directly head-to-head against a Cardinals game. That was an amazing showing by St. Louis football fans. And he wrote over at Pro Football Talk that the NFL should be taking notice and that they should be considering St. Louis if and when the league expands again. Do you think St. Louis would be open to the league coming back here in this market? And if not, what do you think could make that so? What would it take?
I can't imagine St. Louis would say no to it because of the money you'd be bringing in for the city. Like, you're seeing the benefits of having successful teams, and we're talking about a UFL team right now that's bringing in 35,000 people. So imagine if it's a NFL team that's bringing in more. That's more money for the city. It benefits them. The problem and the big concrete brick wall that is going to say, yep, not happening, is the money that is going to have to go into it, and it's going to have to be an expansion team. Because it feels like St. Louis is going to put so many parameters on this, like, yeah, cool, you want to come back to St. Louis? Well, it's kind of like cheating on your wife before you get married, BK. You're going to have to jump through a lot of hoops to make this work for me, meaning I want an expansion team. I want to know that it's here for a long time, and I want it in writing that it's here for a long time. And guess what? This isn't going to be paid for by the city.
You want to know what would be a pretty sweet way for the city to get back at the NFL?
By saying no?
No.
Gotcha.
By getting $800 million in a settlement and then the league coming crawling back to you.
That's the money you could build a stadium with.
I mean, seriously, they pay for our stadium because they screwed it up so badly. Hey, man, we got $800 million to spend here. You got a league that wants a new team some expansion fees. We got some rich people here in St. Louis that could be able to make it possible.
You talk about yourself?
How it works. No, God, no.
You're going to sell your...
I could see how it would work here in St. Louis. There would definitely have to be some guarantees in writing that are put into place of, hey, this, like, the stadium is going to be built and it will be here for at least the next 30 years. No doubt about it. And you will take care, whoever the owner is, of all of the renovations that need to take place within that 30-year period, and this team will not move in that 30-year period. All of that would have to be put into writing.
Do you think one other criteria would be we need a public apology from Stan Kroenke?
Well,
I mean, I feel like that's what the $800 million was for.
Fine, but we want a video of it.
I think it could happen. I don't think now is the time. I think you probably have to get 10, 15 years down the road from when the Rams decided to leave. And I think there's just zero scenario in which the NFL actually does this. But right now, if you're the league and you're looking for, hey, where could we expand? St. Louis has got to be pretty high on that list of markets that would make sense for the league. It would have to be.
Yeah, I can't think of many off the top of my head right now where else they'd be looking, but it'd have to be. And look, all the parameters that you guys laid out, that's what has to happen for it to come back. And I think you're probably right. You're probably 10, 15 years away from that actually happening. Let some of that salt from the wound kind of come off, and then fans will be ready to go. Because of what they're doing with the Battlehawks, NFL's going to keep an eye on them and look at them as a potential expansion team.
I'm looking this up right now. Who are the markets bigger than St. Louis that do not have a football team currently? New York, L.A., Chicago, Philly, Dallas, San Francisco, Boston, Atlanta, D.C., Houston, Detroit, Phoenix, Tampa, Seattle, Minneapolis, Miami, Cleveland, Denver, Orlando, Sacramento. So the only two markets bigger than St. Louis in terms of the TV viewership market that do not have a team are Orlando and Sacramento. And Sacramento has the Bay Area.
And I got to feel like the team would thrive better in St. Louis than Orlando.
Other markets that are similar size that do not have a team right now are Portland, San Diego.
Yeah, been there.
San Diego.
And that's pretty much it, man. Beyond that, it's like basically you get to 31, which is Kansas City, and almost every market in front of them is either very close to a market that has one or already has one. So St. Louis would have to be pretty high on that list unless they expanded internationally. That would be the one other scenario that could take place there. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, this weekend might have broken me emotionally when it comes to the St. Louis Cardinals and where we're at with this team. We'll get into that coming up in about 15 minutes, but coming up next, it's time for the Junk Drawer here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, let's dive into the juncture. Alex, I was shocked last night, genuinely shocked, by how much I enjoyed the Tom Brady roast. I didn't expect to go into this, like, get my socks blown off. Roast used to be a big thing. T-Bone, do you remember when roasts were a thing on Comedy Central?
The Pam Anderson one was the best roast I think I've ever seen.
Like, I saw them, but I don't remember them being a big deal.
It was like a big part of pop culture when we were college-ish age. And
the
then
Justin Bieber one, Steve-O ran into Mike Tyson's fist and broke his nose.
Just kind of went away. Just like, okay, I think we're done with this. They've gone too far, and they kind of got mean. Like, they were no longer funny. They were just mean at that point.
That's when I bought in officially. We should do a roast on BK.
And I think it became too repetitive. There was nothing left to do. Everybody had been roasted, and the things that needed to be said were said, and we kind of moved off of it and went a different direction. So the next thing was the comedy specials. Everything went up on Netflix, and now that's the way that people appreciate comedy. I feel like a lot of what's said previously at roasts is now just like, hey, that's going to be the award shows, like the Oscars, the Grammys, that kind of stuff. The hosts are able to do that there. Alex, yesterday was fun. Like, it was a 2.5 hour special that felt big. It felt like this is a moment in pop culture, and everything has become so fragmented. If you're a sports fan or a comedy fan or a fan of pop culture in a lot of different ways, last night was almost something that you need to watch. And that was an enjoyable experience for me, because there's very few moments that we have like that anymore in our lives that exist where it feels like everybody needs to see this thing.
Yeah, so I missed it because we were out with the girls at my mother-in-law's, so I have it like to watch later on tonight. So I'm going to miss the live portion of it, which of course is unfortunate. But I mean, I saw all the clips that were coming out on social media, and I think the reason that worked so well was because it was an entity that had so many different untouched topics attached to it. Like, you had the Deflategate, you had the cheating with Bill Belichick, you had the Tom Brady being an a-hole and Bill Belichick, you had the massage jokes, which I was waiting for those. Apparently Giselle, exactly. Yeah. Like, everything.
The jiu-jitsu guy?
Did they do a joke about Tom, like, open mouth kissing his son?
I didn't see any of that.
I didn't see that.
No.
I didn't see that.
But, like, honestly, that wasn't good enough. Probably. They were roast. Like,
well, that's what I'm saying.
They really got after
The problem is, like, in terms of, like, celebrity roasts, I don't think there's anybody out there, without legal stuff being attached to it, that you can touch on topics that weren't touched the way that you could with Tom Brady. I mean, you even had the Aaron Hernandez jokes coming up in that one.
Regularly.
So, like, that's why I feel like it was so successful, and why, after hearing you guys talk about it, I'm like, okay, I got to watch this tonight, because you've got the celebrity roasters and Nikki Glaser and Kevin Hart. You've got,
by the way, Nikki Glaser was amazing.
Have you ever seen her stand up?
She opened when we went to Tom Segura. She was the opener for Segura.
Yeah.
So
I've seen her like two or three times.
I'm familiar with her work,
She's
and I kind of had an
incredible.
idea as to what direction this was
And
going.
honestly, like, you could go back to the Justin Bieber roast that she did of him. I think that was like the first roast she was a part of, and it was freaking entertaining. But that's why it was so big, because there were so many different avenues that nobody has touched on.
And you had such big names that also were like hits. Like, I didn't know what to expect out of Bill Belichick, and I thought Belichick was great. Julian Edelman was great. Gronk was really good. Like, if those guys don't hit and they end up doing the roast, you miss out on some of it. And I think also the fact that Tom Brady was a hit as well at the end of the night when he gets to finally start firing off his shots. And originally, you could tell, like, he was a little hesitant, but finally he just said, you know what, screw it. I just sat here for 2.5, 3 hours getting berated. I'm going to read these jokes. I'm going to make them feel a little personal. And that's what made it great.
I once again, Nikki Glaser was the best one that went up there. But Sam J, Alex, if you go back and rewatch it, there's a few that you could probably go ahead and skip. Make sure that you watch Sam J's.
Yeah.
Skip
it was
Affleck.
Unbelievable.
No, I knew Affleck was going to be bad, but now you got to watch. That's a train wreck. See,
people were mean to Drew Bledsoe, by the way. I felt bad for that guy.
Have you guys ever seen, like, the old school celebrity roast with, like, Johnny Carson, like the Carson roast that they used to do? So, like, Don Rickles, who is one of my all-time favorite stand-up comedians, like, he was the king of these. He would essentially do what all of these guys are doing now, where he just goes and just obliterates individuals and goes through and just destroys each one's personality, just takes shots at them. And, like, those those were to the effect of what those first two comedy roasts were. And then, like you said, they got worse because everybody started getting way too raunchy with it.
And so, like, here's what I don't want to have happen, and it's going to happen. 100% will happen.
I know what you're going to say, and it's already in the works.
It is?
Well, I'm saying, I guarantee it's already in the... Like, the next one I almost guarantee you is going to happen is Shaq.
So, the reason why this felt special, it felt big, it felt interesting, is because it was unique. It was something that hadn't happened in a while, and also because of who was involved. Brady was a central figure in our American life for 25 years, dude. He's one of the most famous people in America. And you had all of these different individuals that were willing to go be a part of it because of that. And it was live on Netflix, which is a big part of it. It felt big. Kind of similar to the way that, like, the Manning cast feels big on Monday nights. And then people try to replicate it. It's not the same when other people are doing it. It's special because Mannings are involved. Similar to how the match felt big the first time we watched it. Well, when they do it 10 consecutive years, it no longer feels big or interesting or different. It's just the same commentary with the same people involved doing the same things. Now it's just a celebrity golf match. Who needs that in their life? Could you get away with doing 2 or 3 of these? Yeah, you probably could. But there will come a point in time where it gets with this the way that it did the last time that we did the roast thing. Yep. So don't overdo it. Just take it for what it was, which was an unbelievable night of television. A really excellent night of television. Everybody involved with this, you did your job. Well done. Well done for everybody involved. And now just take it as a win and let's move forward. But that's not what they'll do. They'll have like 3 or 4 or 5 of these the rest of the year.
This is what they call in the biz.
We'll be like, okay, we can move on.
This is a cash cow, and you're about to milk those udders.
Yeah, this is so going to be Shaq next time.
I'm telling you, Shaq is... I will put money down on it that Shaq will be the next one.
I knew it'd be an NBA guy, but I was trying to think someone, like, big that's retired. Because you can't, like... Well, I don't think you can. Like, have LeBron do it now.
I don't think Shaq has enough stuff.
Oh, I guarantee... But, between his rap career, his movie career, his playing career, I think it could be if you get the right roasters. Enough. I think you could.
Brady has the cheating. He literally left his previous significant other while she was pregnant for Giselle, and then Giselle dumped him after he...
honestly, what you do is you go Jordan.
She left him for a jiu-jitsu. He's not doing this.
Well, that's why I said you go. That's who you go, but he won't do it.
You had the murderer that was in his locker room. Like, you had enough stuff there for Brady to be an interesting roast. I don't think it exists for Shaq.
Nothing. There's no athlete that touches the level of Tom Brady. Not with all of the stories surrounding it. Tiger really wouldn't do it.
Oh, and the Trump side of things. Like, Tom having a history with Trump is also a part of last night.
I'm telling you, this is why it's gonna fall flat, though, because you go from that to the next big thing that you think is Shaq, 100%. And when you get there, like, well, these suck. And then it's not going to be fun anymore.
There's not enough content there for other guys. Like, there's a reason why the Dynasty had such high expectation. I think it fell short. I think last night was better than anything you saw in the Dynasty. But the reason why you can have a 10-part documentary series on the Patriots is because there's so much stuff there. And that, just for the most part, was on the fields. This was mostly off the field.
Sometimes you got to milk the cow and tell the cow thank you and let her walk away. That's it. You got what you needed.
Coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to play a game of in or out. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line to get involved. But next, I think this weekend broke me emotionally, guys. I'll tell you why next year on 101 ESPN. have to win 2 out of 3, in my opinion. An absolute must to win 2 out of 3. And in those 2 games, you got to look really good. This offense has got to get back on track. And if it's going to do it, this is the time.
1-2 pitch, got him swinging. John Brebbia shuts the door, and the White Sox take the deciding Game 3, 5-1, and win their second series of the season.
That's what it sounded like over the weekend. NBC Sports Chicago on the return.
Why was only 1 game? Surely they won the other 2.
Say, 1 game doesn't dictate an entire season, BK.
He said in that cut that they won 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
I'm broken. I'm emotionally spent.
At least we won 1.
By watching this team.
Barely.
Cardinals just played 3 games against the Chicago White Sox. And as a team hit 153, they had a 495 OPS. Their OPS plus for the weekend, if you're curious, was like 5. They were terrible. Absolutely terrible. Alex, I don't know what to do anymore.
Give up, man.
Because I look at the back of the baseball cards. This is what I tend to do. And I'm like, hey, one of these things is not like the other. The stats right now do not reflect the hitters that they've been for the entirety of their careers. Now, for some of those guys, it's a longer career than others. I get that. Regression's coming for Goldie. Regression is coming for Arenado. They're getting old. I understand. It shouldn't be like this, though. I wouldn't think. I wouldn't think Donovan, Nootbaar, Gorman, Walker, all these guys just suck now at the plate. I don't believe that. But at a certain point in time, dude, we're 20% of the way through the season. It's not, in the words of Tony La Russa, and I went back and rewatched his entire press conference. God, it was good. It's no longer the first week of the season, man. We're now talking about a pretty decent sample size here of the Cardinals having the second worst offense in Major League Baseball. I think that's going to get better. I no longer believe that this team has the ceiling that I thought they did coming into the season offensively. I think they're pitching better than I expected it to be, but I don't think that ceiling is there anymore offensively. I think this weekend broke me. I don't think I have the same optimism that I once did about the Cardinals in 2024, because this is the worst OPS by a Cardinals team through 34 games since 1986, and it's the second worst in the last 100 years. The only team that was this bad offensively through the first 34 games that made the playoffs, or the last team, rather, to do so was the 1989 Cubs. I mean, we're talking about in the last 30 years of baseball, the Cardinals have one of the worst offenses that you've seen, and if you're looking for a team in the last 30 years that's been this bad this early and made the playoffs, it doesn't exist. What am I supposed to do with that information, Alex? Because I want to come on here and tell you it's going to get better, and I do believe that, but it's going to happen quick enough for them to be able to rebound and make
that's the problem.
Any kind of a meaningful run?
No, it's not. And that's the issue with this. You could look at the back of the baseball cards and say, well, all of these numbers, the cream always rises to the top. Yeah, but at what point does it rise to the top? Because we could end the season and Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado could be at the 25 home run mark, and we could be looking at the on-base percentage for Brendan Donovan and the slugging percentage of Lars Nootbaar all being where you need it to be, and ending the season and say, you know what, overall that was a good run. The problem is, are you going to be at the point where those guys are doing that in the last couple of months of the season? And that's where we get into the conversation of if you have the right guys to take that next step. Because if your guys can't do it in the dire situations of being a above 500 team and winning meaningful games and being a playoff contender, and if all you're doing is putting up points and putting up better numbers at the final 2 months of the season when the season's out of reach, then you're going to be doing the same thing over and over and over. The reason that I feel like I was broken a long time ago with this team, BK, is it's because every single season there's always something. And when the successful teams are showing what they're made of, when they have something go wrong, you fix it quickly and you're right back to where you need to be. The last time that we're always referencing this Cardinals team getting into the playoffs, they had to go on a 17-game win streak in the final portion of the season when everybody had already written them off. And sure, that was a really cool story. We always reference the 2019 Blues team that did it, but they won a cup. And that team got to the playoffs and then lost. So
it was a one-game sample size.
Sure, fine by me, buddy.
2022 was only 2.
Fine by me, buddy. But what I'm saying is this team, when they go through something like this, and it's been the case for the last 4 or 5, basically since 2019, when they go through something that affects their squad, it just continues to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And if it's not the offense, well, guess what's the pitching? If it's not the pitching, well, now you got guys that are injured. And if you don't have injuries, well, now you got the minor leagues where you don't have the depth. The organization can't seem to put it all together right now, which is why I feel like they broke me about 4 years ago.
Yeah, there's always holes that pop up for the Cardinals. And to your question of what are you supposed to make with these offensive numbers, guys, they're not a playoff team. It's just that simple. You lose 2 or 3 to the White Sox. We said it going into that series that you had to win that series and make it the jumping off point and do it convincingly. And I said it on Friday. They lose 2 or 3 or get swept, I'm willing to declare them dead. Yeah. Guys, the Cardinals are not a playoff team. I understand that looking at the back of the baseball card, guys, Paul Goldschmidt's fallen off a cliff. Age has finally caught Paul Goldschmidt. Nolan Arenado, if he's not hitting for 30 home runs, not the traditional 30 home runs, 100 RBI guy, guys, the offense isn't going to be as productive as we thought. And the offense has to be what carries them to the playoffs. I think Donovan, I think Nootbaar, I think Gorman to an extent are all going to get to their point, but they don't have the middle of the order hitters that they need Goldschmidt and Arenado to be. And those guys have just, Goldie especially, has clearly hit the aging curve. I think we can declare that. I'm willing to declare that. I think Arenado's power is showing the aging curve. And if that's the case, guys, this offense just isn't good enough to make the playoffs.
So there is a comparison that you could make. It's not a fun one, but it's a comparison nonetheless. It's got a lot of 2007 vibes to it. Now, 2007, you were coming off of a World Series win, but that was the end of an era for the Cardinals. Jim Edmonds, it was his final year with the club. He had a really down year offensively. He had gone through a little bit of a downward spiral in 2006 in terms of what his offensive production was. He wasn't quite the same level hitter as he was in 05 and prior. And then in 2007, it just fell off a cliff. He ended up being a below league average hitter that year for really the first time in a full season in his entire major league career. And then the next year he was gone. That was it. That was the end of his Cardinals career. And that would be the corollary for Paul Goldschmidt. Edmonds would be the comp for Goldie in this scenario. And then he's not alone in this regard. The other guy that you could point to is Scott Rowland. Scott Rowland in 2006 had a really good offensive season. Wasn't like peak Rowland year, but a really good offensive season. And then in 2007, it just fell off a cliff. He wasn't the same guy offensively anymore. Didn't hit for really any power whatsoever. The year prior, he hit 48 doubles and 22 home runs. That was 2006. 2007, only played 112 games, but 24 doubles and 8 home runs, had an OPS of 730. And then it was over for him here in St. Louis. That would be the Nolan Arenado comparison for what we're watching right now. The other thing with it is you didn't have a Yadier Molina who was really significant in terms of his offensive profile, so you were relying heavily on those 3 bats to lift your lineup. That was the MV3 for a reason, and when 2 of those 3 guys weren't hitting, sound familiar? Got a guy right now that's part of your big 3, quote-unquote, bats that's hitting in Contreras. Now, not to the same level that Albert did in 07, but the other 2 have to pull their weight. And if they don't, you're not going to be able to overcome the lack of depth that exists with your lineup. In 07, it was Rowland and Edmonds who just fell off a cliff and it was over. This year, it might end up being that this is what we're watching with Goldie and Arenado. And it's scary to consider because that was the beginning of not a great era of Cardinals baseball for the next couple of seasons. Forgettable in a lot of respects. That might be what we're watching here in 2024, is the end of this Goldie and Arenado era. Unfortunately, they didn't get the ring the way that they did in 06. The ceiling was not anywhere close to what it was from like the 04 to 06 era for Cardinals baseball.
And the reason that they were able to kind of turn that around, I think 09 was the next time they made the playoffs. So a 2-year kind of down period while you try to reset the core. Well, why are they able to turn it around so quickly? It's because they had that superstar in Albert Pujols. And I'm not saying this guy's going to be Albert, and it shouldn't be that expectation.
Deal for Holiday.
Exactly. And they were able to kind of create this new core on the fly in 2 years. It went from the big 3 to, hey, now you've got Albert and Matt Holliday leading the charge. And at that point, Yadi had kind of emerged as a complementary.
Became a number 1.
Exactly. Where it becomes a lot more difficult and it's harder to see at this point was everybody knew at that time, heading into 07, 08, 09, was, hey, we got Albert freaking Pujols. Who's the superstar that leads to the next era? And that's why I said earlier, I hate to put this much pressure on him. It's Jordan Walker, guys. Jordan Walker, and he's not going to develop into a Pujols because there's no recreating an Albert Pujols. But he's got to become a star for them to quickly transition. If he doesn't, You're not going to see the quick turnaround like you saw from 2007 to 2009 where they're back in the playoffs and they win a World Series 2 years later in 2011. It won't happen. It would be a rebuild. That's exactly what it would be.
And someone's bringing up on the text line that 2022 they had a team that won 93 games and you could rely on. Yeah, but that was Albert Pujols put the team on its shoulders in the second half and ran.
It was a mirage is what it was.
Well, yeah, you were a 500 baseball team in the first half, and then Albert Pujols became Albert Pujols of old and carried your team.
And Arenado had what now is looking like the exception to his time in St. Louis, which was being Nolan Arenado. Goldie wins an MVP, which was unheard of for a first baseman to do that at his age at that point. But they never had any pitching that year, guys. Their pitching was not good enough.
That was when they traded for Jordan Montgomery, right?
And Quintana. Like if they win that series against the Phillies, they're not going anywhere meaningful, in my opinion, in that playoff series.
Somebody on the text line said, BK, they had Tony La Russa in that area as well. They have Ollie Marmol now. Well, Tony, after 2006, missed the playoffs in 3 of the next 4 seasons and did not win a single playoff game in that run. So, like, Tony wasn't guiding them out of anything either. Took until 2011 until they finally got back on track and then obviously went on that historic run in the postseason, and we all know how that ended. There's a book about it if you haven't checked it out. It went pretty well for the Cardinals. But, like, I know, tone problem there.
Total tone problem, but that's fine.
Cardinals
Talk
from
down
2007 to 2010 were in the retool that we're talking about could exist for the Cardinals right now. That's what that was. And yes, they had Tony La Russa to guide the ship, and what that amounted to was 86, 91, 86 wins with 0 playoff wins. Like that wouldn't be unacceptable right now. Cardinals fans would be furious if that's the way that the next 4 years went for the team, whether they loved the manager or hated the manager. So I don't think Cardinals fans were super thrilled then about the direction of what was taking place. And then 2011, you're like, oh, this is all worth it because it amounted in a World Series. So absolutely it was worth it. But to T-Bone's point, like, you need something that is the fixture of the organization in order to get through that. They had at that time Albert, Yachty, and Waino.
Yeah.
You don't have those things in place right now. And that's why it's so scary, dude, is like, I can convince myself even today, maybe I'm gaslighting myself, but like I can convince myself how this gets back on track for 2024. I can. I really can. Beyond that, they need to start seeing a lot more from these young players to feel comfortable about what future seasons look like. Otherwise, they're going to be in a position where they're going to have to trade from depth once again with their position player core to get something resembling a star. Like, they will be in a similar situation to where they were when they had to go out and try to artificially create one with Jason Hayward or with Paul Goldschmidt or with Nolan Arenado or with Marcell Ozuna. Because right now you don't have that guy internally. Hopefully it is Jordan Walker. He's still super young. I am still extremely optimistic. I will buy all of your Jordan Walker shares if you guys are selling them right now. But he needs to become that for them to feel comfortable with where they're at right now. Mason Wynn probably needs to become something similar to what Yachty was early in his career, where he's great defensive value and like emerges into this really good hitter. They're in a really tough spot right now with the way that they're trying to construct this roster, and I think they did it right, but you have to end up getting the players right. It's super fragile. Ask the Cubs. When things didn't end up like the guys that they bet on, they got to the World Series, they won one, they banked it. I would think a decent amount of Cubs fans view that era of Cubs baseball as a disappointment. Not a failure because they got one, but a disappointment because that core was supposed to win multiple rings, dude. And that core is gone. All of them gone now. That's the concerning part for the Cardinals is, do you have that core right now that they had, but without any of the postseason success?
One thing that has been very clear, though, is Goldie and Arenado are not the guys that can carry you through it, because you've had lasting evidence of this not benefiting this team to where these two guys, other than the anomaly like T-Bone mentioned of, hey, MVP season, but didn't do much once they got to the playoffs in that spot, you've learned that those guys aren't the players that can carry you through this.
And I think the other part, and I know nobody wants to hear me say this because I've been trying to run them out of town since, 2012. Guys, we know what they had from the end of 07, 08 till they win the World Series in 11, stability in the front office. You know what's about to happen, whether you like it or not. John Mozeliak's probably going to retire from the position or step down, parting of ways if this goes south this year. And he's always said, I wanted to leave things in a better position for the guy that takes over for me. Man, if he leaves after this season, next season when the contract's up, now you've got this, okay, what happens in the front office? Who's coming in? Changing the philosophy of all this? Do we have the young core that's in place while our superstars start to fade out of the picture? It is a massive question mark for everything surrounding the St. Louis Cardinals at that point.
My biggest fear with the Cardinals' offensive core is that it becomes for you what the pitching core was supposed to be when they had like Alex Reyes, Jack Flaherty, Luke Weaver, that group of players that all came up at the same time, and then basically none of them ended up working out. Who else was a part of that? Your guy, Dakota Hudson, was a part of that wave of pitching as well. And then just none of them ended up working out the way that they were supposed to. Now, they didn't have the same level of prospects pitching-wise then that they have right now with the hitting prospects necessarily. Reyes was the comparison that you'd make to Jordan Walker, but injuries ended that. The problem is all of those pitchers did not become what they were supposed to be. So what the result is now we've got to switch to signing a bunch of guys, trading for a bunch of guys, and all of our resources are flowing in that direction. Meanwhile, we're building this next core of position players. Well, what if the position players then become what the pitching was in like the 2016 to 2019 range? Then you're just doing the same thing where the tail continues to wag the dog and you never actually build upon anything that is stable. You're just constantly churning out these young players, many of which go elsewhere and have more success than they did here, which is concerning. We did get one text that I wanted to respond to real quick before we get out of here. We'll get to in or out on the other side. Somebody said, guys, I have heard, though, that Paul Goldschmidt is a slow starter. Maybe his success is going to be coming in the month of May. I think this gets really overstated in terms of how slow of a starter Goldie has been through the majority of his career. Does he start slow relative to his own expectations? Yes. He has an OPS of 900 or better in every month other than April or September for his career, which speaks to the consistent nature of Goldie's success. But April and September, he's at around 840 for his career in terms of the OPS for him. It's really just the power that seems to go into a little bit of a slump in those two respective months. But the slugging percentage for him in his career in April is 460. Slugging percentage for him in September is 475. It's not as if he's normally bad to start the season. He's just a little down relative to his own expectations. The one comparison that you could make is probably 2021 for him, where he was really bad in the month of April and then eventually kind of figured it out. That being said, if you're looking at what he did in the 2021 season, for his standards, I don't know. He's in a really tough place right now. And I don't know if we can expect him to get this thing back on track because he's had quote-unquote struggles in April and previous years. His struggles are not like this. He almost never has an April like this. This was really, really, really bad, man. There's nothing you can point to other than like the 2007 Cardinals that would make you feel any better about it.
It doesn't make me feel any better.
Coming up next, in or out here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my insurance agent, Tracy Bibb. I had a conversation with her a few weeks ago now because my insurance was up and needed to look at the rates and everything going on. And the conversation that I had with Tracy was just about the insanity that is insurance rates right now, where some places are closing down, other places are hiking up the prices. This is why you have to be with the right agent. This is why you have to be with somebody who's got their best outlook and best interest for you, and that is Tracy and her team with Allstate. Always checking in to make sure the rates are competitive, making sure they're saving you money. And here's the important part. When something happens, fender bender, maybe you get some flooding with all of the rain that we get at this time of the year, or maybe the storms knocks a tree down on your roof, you need to have somebody who's available for you. And that's Tracy and her team. Give her a call today. Mention my name, Alex Ferrario, and you could get a free non-committal quote from Tracy. She'll walk you through the whole process, and she'll even cancel your previous insurance agency before you sign up with her and her team. 314-328-4260, 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the bib. Ooh, hoo, hoo, hoo.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. I had one, but T-Bone just mentioned something off air that we've got to get to here. Guys, in or out, and Mundo Sosa is about to go on a 6-week run that Cardinals fans look at and say, man, wish I had that guy here again.
In. Former Cardinal, right? Always seems to happen.
The Phillies, for those that didn't see it, are going to be without Trey Turner for the next little while.
Edmundo,
on the injured list.
It's going to be the hero they need.
He's going to be starting for them every day now.
He's going to be the hero that they need.
I'm going to say out, and here's why.
You don't believe that.
Yeah, you don't believe that.
Well, no, I do believe that, and here's why. Because I actually think he'll put up solid numbers, because every time he starts, he hits. He's not going to, like, show through and hit for power and, like, make a name out of himself, because they've got Harper, Schwarber, Castellanos, and JT Realmuto still. So, like, this isn't like the Rays, where when Randy Arozarena goes there, nobody knows any Tampa Bay Ray. I still don't know a Ray outside of Randy Arozarena and Richie Palacios. So when Arozarena went off, it was clear for me to point out, and that's why.
I've got one of the lows or lows.
No, not anymore, man. I thought they moved on from him.
Did they?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I think one of them's still there.
They got the Yandy Diaz.
He stinks now.
He's Yandy.
They got Brandon, low or low. He's on the IL, though, but he is there. He's still part of their
it's understandable. You didn't know if he's there or not.
It's the fact that we're sitting here debating these conversations.
I'm out on this because Cardinals fans, I do think one thing I've learned this year is if the return is pretty solid, you'll be okay with the guy going elsewhere and putting up decent numbers. Richie Palacios doing well so far this year for Tampa, but I don't hear as many calls for him the way that we have for like Randy Arozarena, for example, because of what you got in return. Andrew Kittredge has been really good for you so far this season. He's saved your bacon a number of times.
I think we lost the train.
If they got like Riley O'Brien, for example, in return for Palacios, people would be furious right now because
Riley
of the
O'Brien
success
looked
that he's
great.
having. He did look really good, but he got hurt, and so the results are what we ultimately decide this on. So I'm out because of what the return was. Alex, what do you got?
Guys, in or out, somebody is going to win this draft lottery tomorrow in the NHL.
Yes.
Well, yes, somebody is. I agree.
Well, okay, what I mean by that is they are going to move up significantly from where they are at.
Frame it that way then, man.
Well, that would be winning the lottery.
Well, I mean, technically, San Jose is the number one most likely team to win the lottery, but they would have to win the lottery.
No.
Frame the question better next time.
All right, cool. I'm out.
It's a terrible question.
I'm in because I don't think San Jose is winning this thing. I don't think they want their number one pick going to San Jose.
Why, man? San Jose.
Have you looked at their roster?
Yeah, that's why they got to win it.
I'll say in. I think somebody will move up significantly, but I'm thinking like significantly like
I've got
top
I've got a team for you.
At 5, maybe?
I got 1, 2.
Arizona.
Utah?
Yep.
Yeah, that's mine. I think they're winning it.
What are they at right now?
6th.
They're
7.5% chance.
Yeah.
Isn't that where the Blues were last year?
No.
No, they were 10.
No, they were
I
10.
was to say they were further back.
Blues are at
Blackhawks
16th
were that,
right
weren't
now.
they? Weren't the Blackhawks?
No,
pretty high?
Blackhawks. No, the Blackhawks were low. They were like Blues territory when they won it.
Because
you can only move up 10 spots.
Baseball and hockey are a little different in this regard, I think. Chicago could win it again this year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're.
Yeah. There's no limitation on how many times you can win.
No, there is. They've changed that to where you can only win. I think you can only get the first overall pick 3 years in a row.
Okay, so they could technically win it again this year. That's what they do.
Yeah, where were the?
I amend my answer. I think Chicago will win the lottery.
They were probably third last year. San Jose, Anaheim would have been down there. Columbus. So they were
When did Chicago? Chicago was like 12th or 13th or 14th, and they moved up. They won the lottery with like 1% chance because they moved up to like the 4th or 5th overall pick.
When?
I was trying to figure out what year it was.
Probably when they
I hope the Blues win it. That'd be cool.
To go up
they
to
got a
6?
0.5% chance to be able to move up to number 6 overall. Otherwise, they're going to be picking 16th most likely.
Yeah.
Timo?
Not a good spot.
Not a great spot at all. Guys, in or out? Paul Goldschmidt will get to 20 home runs this season.
And I know, it's blind faith, honestly. But I'm going to continue believing in guys that have put up the numbers that Goldie and Arenado have until I can't believe in it anymore. He's got 2 so far this year. They're 20% of the way through the year, on pace currently for 10. I think he's going to get better than that, but
I'll give you a different one. I got one that I'm not going to lie, moment of truth here. I had one, forgot it, and quickly threw that one out there.
Nice.
Guys, in or out? Cardinals have a 4-game set coming up with the Brewers this week.
Oh, God.
Cardinals drop 3 of 4 or get swept. They are officially done in your mind.
And I mean, they're done in my mind right now because I think they're a 500 team, and I don't think you're making the playoffs as a 500 team. But yeah, you lose 3 of 4 to the Brewers. You've lost both series against the Brewers, and you're not catching them, and I don't think you're going to be a wild card team.
And there's going to come a certain point in time where we just have to say the Brewers are better than we expected them to be this year, and I don't think that's going to change. At least I can speak for myself. I didn't think they were going to be this good in 2024. I'm still skeptical of it, but if they beat you 3 out of 4 again and continue playing this well, it's hard for me to say that anybody's done when they're still around 500 in mid-May. But I think you'd have a pretty good idea that the Cardinals, as currently constructed, are not going to be able to go. I'm out. I don't think they're done in mid-May.
I'd say in. I think they can put the nail in the coffin.
Can you feel how much I'm trying to talk myself into that? Like, I
just did a segment last
break
of being broken.
I'm trying to be over here optimistic, and I still sound broken. I don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah, you're about where I were about mid-season with the Blues.
It is obvious, and I don't know about the Reds. We'll see about the Reds. I don't think Pittsburgh's better than you. I actually think they're worse, even though their pitching's really good. The Reds, it's wait and see. I think the Cubs are significantly better than you. They just took 2 of 3 from Milwaukee, and we saw Milwaukee come into St. Louis.
Smoke and mirrors too, though. Yeah. It's weird.
They're doing it because they got a manager who's got good vibes for his team.
Oh, that is so true.
Did you hear Pete Crow Armstrong on Foul Territory today? Said he puts good vibes in that clubhouse so we never get down on ourselves.
Meanwhile,
what's your manager doing?
Well, in Ollie's defense, Marp was on a rehab assignment.
Oh, so he's bringing the good vibes.
I told you on Friday we shouldn't send him on a rehab assignment against the White Sox, and what did they do?
The funny thing is, you look at their numbers offensively, like, they're not super impressive either. They're scoring runs. I don't understand it.
Well, they're being bailed out by Talkman, who's been awesome so far this year.
I think the Reds
Swanson, by the way, thank God you avoided that grenade. He's getting on base 28% of the time with a 640 OPS so far this year.
He helped them beat the Brewers.
That's better than like 7 guys on your team, though.
God, that would be like the third best OPS on this roster. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. Somebody on the text line said BK is physically incapable of being pessimistic. No, I do that really well during the Blues season. It's just something about the Cardinals.
Same over here. We have our rules.
All right, in or out, the Cardinals will win 7 of the next 10. That comes from the 314.
That's funny.
That tied into my Brewers one. I think they can take 2 or 3 from the Mets. I don't feel good about saying it out loud, but I think they can. I just don't know if they can go to Milwaukee and win on the road.
They can't win on the road.
You know that meme of... That's me looking at the Cardinal schedule right now.
Doesn't she at the end say, no?
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's not possible.
Who they got after Milwaukee? They've
Angels.
Angels.
Oh, and they've got to go out west, dude.
Yeah, and we know how they are on the road. They don't get proper sleep and their backs hurt.
Oh, God. There's
Have we
definitely
fired the travel secretary yet?
Hey!
In or out, Zach Bolduc scores at least 20 goals next year for the Blues. I know what Alex's response is going to be to this.
Trade him.
Probably get good pieces for that one, actually. I'm going to say out. I think he's going to be up and down this year. I'd say if you put the number at...
When you say up and down, you mean like up and down production-wise, not up and down from the
NHL
to the
no,
NHL.
up and down production-wise. I think you're probably looking at somewhere between like 15 to 18.
I'd agree with that. I'd say out. I think we did this with Neighbors. His first year was, and in fact, I think the Blues did this, was, hey, we need 20 goals from Neighbors. And it just wasn't anywhere close to being able to happen because you're going to go through the ebbs and flows. I think you're going to see Bolduc on the top line for stretches next year, or at least in the top 6. When he's going well, then there's going to be a lot of stretches where he's probably on the third line. So I would say out on this.
All right, we got one more from the 314. Guys, in or out, the NHL playoffs are showing that the Blues are a lot further away from being a contender than previously thought. Save your answer on that. I want to get to that on the other side and some of the lessons that should be learned from the Maple Leafs failures in the postseason. We can combine that with the Kings failures with Pierre Luc-Dubois. We'll get to all of that coming up next year on 101 ESPN. I got to tell you about how you can unlock your inner champion. There's one place to go. There's one place to do it. It's Victory Men's Health and VictoryMen'sHealth.com. They've got 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, including in O'Fallon, Illinois, O'Fallon, Missouri, Town and Country, and Sunset Hills, Missouri. That Sunset Hills location is their newest one. And when you walk inside, this is not going to be like some of those other low testosterone places that you might have gone to in the past. It is a state-of-the-art location. Any of the 4 are. And when you walk through the door, you're going to be like, man, this is absolutely stunning. They are going to unlock your inner champion, whether that means helping you out with your erectile dysfunction. Maybe it is a low testosterone issue that has you feeling a little bit groggy when you wake up in the morning, or could be something as simple as weight loss where you've been struggling with it. You've done all of the different things that you can think of, and there's just no way that you can shed that unwanted weight. Well, they might be able to help you out at Victory Men's Health. So go ahead and check them out today. Go to one of their 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, or check out all that they have to offer at VictoryMen'sHealth.com.
Terry Hendricks here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Cardinals back in action tonight as they start a 3-game set with the New York Mets. Kyle Gibson's on the mound for St. Louis. Sean Manaea will get the start for New York. 6:45 is first pitch. The Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alex, there was a big piece earlier today over, I think it was on The Athletic, about Pierre Luc-Dubois, what his future holds with the LA Kings. And they brought up the possibility that they would buy him out, which, oh boy, what an offseason trade that was for the LA Kings.
That's 8 years at $8 million that you're buying out. You thought Suter and Parise were bad with Minnesota. Woof. Although those were still worse. It was like $11 million.
It'd be a disaster. However, I don't know if they're necessarily going to do that, but it speaks to the failures this year of what happened to the LA Kings with Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think you could also bring Toronto into this, right? Pierre-Luc Dubois is very much a flash and dash player, more so than a substance player, in my opinion at least. Toronto has some of that. Toronto is trying to build around guys that are very much, hey, we're going to get shots on net, and hopefully that's enough for us to advance in the postseason. Unfortunately for them, they ended up scoring, I believe it was 8 goals in 6 games against Swayman in this series against the Boston Bruins. When you're constructed that way, it honestly reminds me a lot of the Cardinals, where it's like, hey, we're going to win with offense. Don't worry about the pitching. We're going to win with offense. And then when the offense dries up in the postseason, you're like, wait, what are we supposed to be winning with here again? I don't understand. There's a certain way you got to win in the playoffs in the NHL. And Alex, we got a text in the last segment during in or out of, do you feel like the Blues are further away from contending in the postseason than what you did prior to this postseason? As you're watching these games, you see what happened to Toronto, you see what's happening right now with the Kings, etc. Do you feel like they're further away, or do you feel pretty much the same as you did prior to the postseason?
I feel pretty much the same. Like, I don't feel like there's at least in the Western Conference, I don't feel like there's an overwhelming, like, wow, you are never going to catch up to those teams. If we're talking for contending for a Stanley Cup, then yeah, because I look at Carolina and Florida and even Boston and think, like, you can't compete with that because you just don't have the defense that can find a way to shut down the opposition. But, like, I think you got the goaltending. I don't really know what lesson I learned from the LA Kings, but watching the Western Conference play, I think you could have probably at least stayed competitive with most of these teams in the Western Conference because of goaltending. It was very evident that Winnipeg wasn't going to be any good in this postseason, hence their goaltender being terrible and not getting a lot of offense. It was, I kind of assumed Vegas was going to have issues. Frankly, they were better than I thought they were going to be.
Yeah, Mark Stone is still hurt.
Yeah, well, sure, that's what it was. No, it was the fact that you had no secondary offense, and you couldn't find a way to overcome that.
Can we take an aside here for 1 second?
Sure.
What was your level of happiness
Celebrate.
yesterday?
Oh, yeah, dude. My daughter, Adelaide, and I were watching that game last night when we got home from dinner at my mother-in-law's, and we sat down, and I go, Adelaide, who do you want to win? And I said, the team in green or the team in white? And she goes, team in white. And I said, no, team in green. So I was teaching her to root against Mark Stone.
There you go.
Very happy with that one. So, like, I look at the Western Conference and think, like, you know what? You make some tweaks. I think you're probably in the same position you were next year, but you've got the goaltending that overcomes it. The lesson I learned from the LA Kings is apparently one person can ruin an entire team. And we didn't think that was possible, but one person really could ruin an entire roster, hence trying to buy out a dude you just signed to an extension. But I think the overwhelming narrative after this first round and seeing who's advancing, you can't rely on offense. And Toronto is showing you that right now. You can't rely on having 4 guys that are expected to be 90 to 100-point players, because when push comes to shove and when it matters most, you've got to have 2 things. The ability to shut down the other team's best offense, which Boston did, and you've got to have great goaltending. And that's where I feel like if you want to talk about being closer or further away after watching these playoff teams, I think you make a couple improvements, including fixing your defense, finding somebody in the top 4, and bringing in a little bit more depth to your offense, and I think you can be right there with some of these teams in the Western Conference.
Man, I know it's so boring, but Have you just taken a look at who the players are that are scoring the most goals this postseason?
Yeah. It's not your stars.
It's all of the dudes that get to the front of the net. Like, all of them. That's not exclusive. That is predominantly where the goals are scored in the playoffs. And when I see that and I think to myself, okay, how do the Blues fit into that mix? It's really hard for me to convince myself that you can win if in your top 6 you have both Kyrou and Buchnevich. And I'm somebody that has
not just your top 6, your top line.
Potentially. I don't know if you can win that way long term. I don't. And it does. I'm flip-flopping all the time on this Buchnevich thing because I think it's such a difficult decision to get right. I think it's so hard to just let that dude walk out the door this offseason. I know you're getting something in return, but when you have not a superstar, but a star-level player in his prime right now, it's really hard for me to say, yeah, trade that guy. Let him go. It's so hard to do. It might be the right choice, though, given the way that you're constructed around him and given your timeline of when he's likely going to be on a contender again here in St. Louis. And as I'm watching these other teams around the league, man, I don't know that you need that guy necessarily. I think you need something a little different in your top 6. And I think you need a lot of them. You just need to be able to go into any given game with like 9 dudes that can score for you.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, I don't think you can be overly reliant the way that Toronto is on 3 or 4 guys that do all of your scoring. Because if 2 of those guys get taken out of the series, and we see this all the time, you don't have enough options that remain for you to be able to score. When they had like 2 of their 4 lines going on the ice, you didn't feel like they could score.
Yeah.
They were incapable. And you've got to be able to roll 4 lines. To your point, Alex, you've been telling me this for years, and I'm finally coming around to it. You've got to have 4 different lines that have the ability to score anytime they're on the ice. The Blues did not have that last year. It's going to take some time for them to build that up again. And I do think that watching this postseason, I don't know that I feel that they're further away. I do think it should influence, though, how I'm feeling about their offseason decisions.
Yeah, I mean, like I watch how some of these teams play, and I think Mitch Marner is a really good example of what you're looking for. And look, Mitch Marner is a performer in the playoffs. It's just this year he was not. But go back and watch that overtime goal. If you're a perimeter player, you're not going to have success in the postseason. You've got to be willing to go to the areas that present you the opportunity to win puck battles. And if you play perimeter hockey where you float around and you look for the shots, and I'm talking about anybody, you're not going to have success unless you're Connor McDavid or Nathan McKinnon that can create openings solely off of your skill. If you're a player that has to create it from effort and ability to create space, you're not going to have success in the postseason. Look at Boston. Like, Boston made it through because their goaltending was incredible, but they barely made it through the first round with a historic run by Jeremy Swayman because you didn't have enough guys that were willing to go to the dirty areas. And how did they win? David Pastrnak took it straight to the net.
And by the way, on your point about McKinnon, that dude is a freight train as well.
Absolutely.
Like,
he plows through people.
He has some of that physicality, and the guys that led Colorado in scoring in the first round, Valerie Nichushkin, and
Power forward.
Arturi Lehkonen.
Power forward. Yeah.
These are the guys that are having the success. Zach Hyman for Edmonton, Steven Stamkos, Jarvis, Wyatt Johnson, Brock Besser, Zibanejad, Tkachuk.
All of these dudes
Marchand,
are net front presence.
Kyle Connor, maybe a little bit different there, but DeBrusk. Like, these dudes all have a lot of similarities in the way that they play, where they win, and it is influencing for me. And I know it's just one series that I think it's going to continue being this way in the playoffs. It's influencing how I feel about the Blues offseason.
You have some of these guys. Like, Jake Neighbors is this guy. I think Alexei Toropchenko is this guy. I think you have individual players. The problem is, are they your best players that are able to dictate ice time?
The Rewind next here on 101 ESPN. All right, I talked about how emotional I am. I used this as an opportunity for therapy, so I did a bad job with the clock in our 1 o'clock hour. We did really good in the 12 o'clock hour. 1 o'clock, I got off again. So if you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Alex, Cardinals back in action tonight. Do you think they get a win? Got Kyle Gibson on the mound?
Yeah, okay, so that's a win because after that, it's not a win.
They're not very good.
Well, and after tonight, we all know who's going to be available.
I think they win 2 out of 3 in this series against the Mets. I think they will lose tomorrow. I think they win tonight, and I think they win on Wednesday.
I say you lose 2 out of 3. You'll win tonight, and you'll lose the next 2.
You think they lose with Sonny Gray on the mound? That'd be disappointing.
Can't score a lot of runs, so.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I think they'll take 2 or 3. I think they can win tonight. If they don't, though, and Gibson doesn't give them innings, this becomes a series that is very much in jeopardy because of the bullpen status.
He's giving them innings no matter what.
He gives up 10 tonight. He's got to go 6. Like, that's where they're at.
Scale of 1 to 10. How surprised are you that there was no change that was made over the past 24 hours?
Oh, still time.
I've got like a 2. I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, I'd say a 1. I didn't expect them to do anything.
I'd say I'm at a 3. My disappointment level out of 1 to 10 would be 10.
Oh, yeah, 10.
Plenty more coming up today on the Cardinals with the Fast Lane. They also have a ticket giveaway to a UFC fight night, so enjoy that. That's coming up from 2 to 6. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. here on 101 ESPN.